gustong sabihin natin dito? When we make, ayan na, nandito na nga, di ba? When we make strategic decisions, ayan, naapektuhan yung playing field natin. And ang example nito, kunwari bumili tayo ng machine, kailangan natin siyang bawiin. Now, we have to adjust yung costs natin. So, this is one of the factors that affects yung standards natin when it comes to cost. So, what are, diba? Ang next question natin, we know what standards are. Again, ito yung mga benchmark natin, diba? Mga kailangan nating abutin. We know where they come from. So, nandito yung listahan natin. What are the types of standards that we can have? So, this is a big part of performance evaluation. Diba? Dinadaanan lang natin kasi hindi naman siya tinatanong ng sobra-sobra pagdating sa exam. Pero, just think of it as how you would like to be managed, how you would like to be evaluated. No? For example, kung ini-evaluate ka based on something that is perfect, diba? To the point na hindi mo siya maaabot in real life, it becomes a theoretical standard. That's something that we call the ideal standard. Ayan. So yung ideal standard na yan, this is under the pretense, ano assumption natin dito? If this is a machine, hindi siya nag-breakdown, walang waste, walang oras na nasasayang, everyone's working at maximum efficiency, diba? You don't need to take CR breaks, stuff like that. Diba? Ito yung standard na pinapag-usapan natin, idea. So, would you want to be evaluated based on that standard? Diba? These are things that you have to ask yourself. Kasi if you don't want to be evaluated that way, most likely other people don't want to be evaluated based on ideal standards as well. But this is a type of standard that we can have. Diba? We can assume na, as in walang breakdown, walang breaks, and walang inefficiencies. So, may use ba siya kung ideal siya or theoretical na lang? Actually, yes. Diba? Pero sabi mo kanina, ayaw nating ma-evaluate na perfect kasi hindi siya naabot. Kasi imagine mo, kunwari, yung bonus mo, based siya sa ideal level. Ibig sabihin natin yung perfect level. May tao ba ng perfect na kayang gawin yun, na kayang abutin yun? Wala, diba? Tapos doon ka i-evaluate. Ano mangyayari sa'yo? Nakukuha mo ba yung bonus mo ever? Hindi. Diba? So would you want to be evaluated this way? Of course not. Diba? Pero, may gamit yan. We have something that we call Kaizen. Diba? So this is something that you'll talk about in Section D because you have strategic cost management embedded in that topic. Pero, don't discount ideal standards. We shouldn't use them to evaluate yung mga tao natin. We'll talk about how we evaluate them later. Right now, we'll be focusing on variance analysis. If we still have time later, pag-usapan natin yung performance evaluation measures pa. Pero if hindi, diba, may next weekend naman tayo. So, anyways, yung ideal standards natin, we don't want to evaluate our people on that. First off, because it's not fair. No one can achieve that standard. So, bakit mo i-impose? Pero, diba, what if you want to constantly improve? Pag nag-i-improve ka, anong sabi natin sa historical data? If you want to achieve your goals, diba, kunwari, nandito yung goal mo, bakit ka magsastrive na mapunta ka dito? Diba? Ang best na way is on a scale of 1 to 10, kunwari. Ayan. Oops, nagulala ko yung mouse ko. Alright, 1 to 10. 10 being the highest. Ang goal mo 7. Kung magsastrive ka para sa 7, ano mangyayari? Diba? Usually, yan ang maximum goal mo, ayan, minsan hindi mo pa maabot. Pero if you attain for something ideal, diba? If you try to achieve something perfect, ayun, baka hindi mo mahit ang perfect goal mo, pero you will be well above yung original goal mo. Diba? That's one use for ideal standards. Something that we continuously work towards, pero wag mo siyang gamitin na basis sa pag-evaluate ng tao mo. Either maraming ma-demotivate or mataas ang attrition rate mo sa loob ng company mo. So, alright. Meron naman tayong practical. maayos siya sa idea when it comes to evaluation. And this is usually yung prescribed na type of standard na ginagamit natin. Bakit? Kasi it's ideal standards, pero ano ang difference niya? Now, we acknowledge na people need to take breaks. There's a normal amount of wastes, losses, and inefficiencies. Hindi mo matatanggal. Diba? Even if you have a machine, diba? Hindi na tao yung pinapag-usapan mo. May certain level lang na pwedeng mag-run ang machine mo para hindi naman siya mag-breakdown lagi. Diba? You can't always run it at 100% efficiency. So that's something nagulat rin ako nung nalaman ko sa work. The first time I had to handle a manufacturing company. But it makes sense, diba? Parang tao rin, you can't always be 100% because you'll burn yourself out. So, eto yung pinaka, diba? Nandun na mismo sa pangalan niya, it's the most practical standard. So, we push people to be their best, pero we acknowledge na, yun nga, tao ka lang. You need a break. Sometimes you're not 100% all of the time. Ayan. Ang normal naman, if kailangan mo siyang tandaan, i-base mo na lang siya dito sa historical data. When we talk of normal capacity, diba? Ano yung normal para sa iyo? Yun yung sinasagot mo. So normal capacity is usually, okay, what happened last year? What happened the last 5 years? Ano yung average natin? Yun usually yung ginagamit na standards when we're talking about normal capacity or normal standards. Ano ang lax? When we talk about lax na capacity, ito naman na yung, ayan, ano yung term na ginagamit natin sa budgeting? Meron tayong slack. So naglalagay tayo ng slack pagdating sa standards natin. We assume na our people aren't performing at their best at all. Diba? Definitely from that description alone, we don't want to use this for performance evaluation. For the same reasons why we don't put budgetary slack in our budgets. Diba? Or at least we try not to. Diba? We want to push people to be their best. So, when it comes to setting performance evaluation standards, ano yung game natin dito? We have to push our people, but we have to be fair. So fair doesn't mean hanggang ano ba yung kaya mo. Diba? I think tayo naman dito, diba? We are thriving sa accountancy profession. Ano yung nangyayari sa atin? Nung pumasok naman tayo, nung estudyante tayo, hindi naman tayo accounting material. Diba? Pero mahirap yung course natin pag pumasok ka rin sa firm. Diba? Or kahit hindi ka mag-firm, mag-private ka. Pero as an accountant, diba, yung workload niya is very challenging. Kung binigyan ka ng workload na hanggang dun lang sa tingin mong kaya mo, anong mangyayari sa'yo? Hindi ka na sana mag-grow, diba? So it's a challenge. It has to be fair na reasonable siya. Pero hindi siya lax in the sense na kung hanggang sa ano yung sinabi mong kaya mo hanggang doon ka lang. Hindi, di ba? We want to push our people to be more effective, more efficient. Di ba? So, kaya nandito tayo sa practical standards. Ito yung prescribed sa atin na gamitin. Okay? So, that's intro siguro natin sa standards. We have a few more slides on it later. Are standards the same as budgets? Definitely not. So, tingin tayo dito. Ang budgets natin, again, eto yung, usually, if you had to put it in simple words, eto yung large scale mo. Diba? Ang standards mo, usually, saan siya projected? This is per unit. Diba? So, meron kang per unit, usually yun yung standards mo. And then, kapag minultiply mo na siya ng expected capacity mo, expected level of activity mo, dun na lumalabas yung budgets natin. So, if you can recall, ang budgets natin, sige, daanan muna natin to. Baka nadidistract tayo sa words. So, ayan, budgets are statements of expected cost. So, usually projected na siya in total. Diba? And yung standards natin pertain to what cost should be given a certain level of performance. So, anong emphasis natin? Budgets emphasize that cost levels should not be exceeded. Diba? And ang standards natin, if you have to think of it this way, we have a budget na 500,000. Dapat di ka lalampas ng 500,000. Yun na yung parang sabi natin kanina, di ba? Yun yung threshold mo. Pero ang standards mo, di ba? How far should you reduce yung costs mo? So ayan, we have this. Budgets are set for all departments of the firm. Tapos standards, usually, pag tinitignan mo siya, ano yung pinaka-common na discussion natin when it comes to standards? We have something called standard costs. So usually they're set only for the production or manufacturing division of the firm. So, ayan. Ang analysis natin, alright, when the actual data differs from the budget, it could be an indication of either good or bad performance. Pero pag sa standards, ayan. So the significant variance, ini-investigate rin siya so that necessary corrective actions are taken accordingly. So not necessarily different siya. No? Something that we will have to talk about later is management by exception. Ang point neto is, kapag nag-set ka ng standard, hindi naman laging matatamaan yung standard na. Usually, we go over. We can also go under. Pero, para siyang signal na. You still have to investigate why it happened para malaman mo yung root cause. And dun mo ibibase yung corrective action. We'll talk about that later. So, okay. We've talked about standards. And, something that you should know is that standards exist for almost everything. We have standards for sales. Diba? So, again, saan galing ang sales natin? Dalawa lang naman ang driver natin. We have price and we have volume. So, ayan. Pero you can actually break that down even further. What if you have multiple products? Diba? Pag may multiple products ka, syempre natatamaan yung revenue mo. So, you can set standards for ano ba yung ratio and proportion ng different products natin. So, let's say, for example, meron kang product A, meron kang product B, meron kang product C. Ayan. So, what do we mean by setting standards when it comes to the mix? So, ito yung pinapag-usapan natin yung mix. It could be nasa normally, the volume natin, 100,000 units. Diba? That could be our standard for volume. 20% or 20,000 would be from A. Diba? Sa product line B naman natin, 50%. Tapos yung remaining 30%, yun yung kinocontribute ni product C. So that could be our standard for it. Diba? Yan rin, pwede natin lagyan ng standards. Ang quantity naman natin, anong ibig sabihin nito? When you have multiple product lines, ayan, you have the effect of the sales mix. Pero meron rin mismo, redundant words. Meron rin yung mismong effect on the sales volume. So, ibig sabihin yan, the discrepancy sa volume mo could be also because of the mix, pero pwedeng wala na naman nagbago sa quantity. Ang normal mo is 100,000 units sold, nakabenta ka ng 100,000 units sold. Or it could be na wala kang problema sa mix, nasunod lahat, pero ayun, we have a standard on the quantity sold. So pwedeng 100,000 yung in-expect mo mabenta, 90,000 lang nabenta mo. Ayan. And you can even break that down further. Bakit may discrepancy between yung ating sales volume or sales quantity? Diba? It could be because we were not able to capture the market share that we wanted. Diba? So medyo nag-advance na ako. I'm talking about the differences, the variances. We'll go more in depth on that later. Pero my point being is we could have standards when it comes to market share. We could have an expectation na we will capture 5% of the market. So ano ba yung market natin? We have to talk about the market size as well. If we expect yung mga total population ng bebentahan natin to be, kunwari, a target demographic natin is people under 18 who like to drink coffee, for example. Tapos based on research natin, we currently have 10,000 people who are under the age of 18 that drink coffee. Ayan. So, eto yung market size natin. That's the standard. Tapos market share natin, we expect na based on our marketing efforts, based on the quality of our product, basta yung 4 P's of marketing. Tama ba? Ayan. Nakalimutan ko yung specific letter, no? Pero, diba? Ito yung expectation natin na we will capture 5% of the market. So, ang tanong ko, yung quantity mo, ayan, saan galing? It is based on the market size multiplied by the expected market share. Diba? So, dito natin mabubuo na yung expected quantity pala natin is 10,000 times 5%, we have diba, a sales volume or sales quantity of 500. Diba? So, dito, diba, ang dami mo nang mabubuklat na standards. And kung familiar na kayo sa variance analysis, definitely hindi kasi ito yung first time na nakita nyo na. Dito rin siya nanggagaling. We have standards that we established for each factor that gives rise to our sales. And kapag nagkakaroon tayo ng variances, ng deviations from those standards, ayan, doon na tayo nag-apply ng variance analysis. Diba? So, if we have standards for sales, meron din tayong standards for cost. So, ayan, lahat ng alam nyo, usually, diba, ang pinaka-common is direct materials, you have direct labor, you also have overhead. Ayan, yan yung tatlong pinaka-alam natin kasi dyan tayo nagko-compute. We have standards for these two. So, we call them standard costs. Question. Lagi pa tayo nagsa-standard costing na. Do all companies use standard costing? Is it the only way to cost materials? Definitely not. So, nandito rin yung usapan natin on different costing systems such as meron tayong actual costing. Ano pa? Definitely, di ba, pinag-usapan na natin, meron tayong standard costing. But there is an in-between. And yung in-between na yun is yung normal costing. Ano ba yung differences nila? Meron tayong actual costs, di ba? So this doesn't have to be explained. It's the actual na nagastos mo compared sa standards. Di ba? Ang standards, eto formulate natin. Again, eto yung benchmark natin. Sabi natin, dapat ang direct materials, dapat 10 pesos lang yan. Pero lagi ba siyang masusunod? Definitely hindi. Di ba? Kasi, sorry, busog na busog ba? so definitely, yung actual na gagastusin natin for direct materials, iba. Pero ano bang pumapasok sa cost ng inventory natin? So the cost of our goods are usually composed of these three. Diba? Etong tatlo. Ang tanong ko, diba? If yung cost ng tatlo, lahat yan is measured not on standards, pero yung actual na ginastos natin, that's what we call actual costing. Diba? Kung lahat naman yan based sa standards, edi simple. Standard costing ang tawag natin. Pero bakit meron tayong normal costing? Ang normal costing natin, ito kasi yung analysis natin. Standard costing, we do it, bakit? Yung isang reason na pinag-usapan natin kanina, it's because yung costs natin, we have targets for them. We want to push our people to be more efficient. So, to be more efficient, naglalagay tayo ng standards. Dapat hindi kayo sumobra dyan. Diba? Now, we can do standard costing for overhead, direct materials, and direct labor. We can push our people to be more efficient in all of those aspects. But what's another reason why we do standard costing? It's simply because the actual information isn't always available immediately. So imagine mo, di ba, ang pinaka-common criminal nito, it's overhead. Ano ba yung mga kasama sa overhead natin? Pinaka-common example is utilities. Kunwari, electricity. Do you have real-time information of how much of the electric bill you're supposed to pay? Diba? You can compute it, pero usually, for companies, nakukuha na lang nila yung information na yun at the end of the month. So my question is, do you only sell at the end of the month? Hindi, diba? You sell throughout the month. So are you gonna wait until the end of the month para lang ma-cost mo ng maayos yung inventory mo? Hindi. Diba? You need real-time information to make real-time decisions. So ano rin yung workaround natin doon? We use standard costing. That's one of the ways that standard costing is used. Not only does it push our people to be more efficient, it also helps us with the accounting process, the costing process, para mapabilis siya. We don't need to wait until the end of the month or until all of the actual costs are gathered before we can assign costs to our inventories. Diba? Yun yung isang reason doon. So bakit tayo may normal costing? Ganun siya. Diba? Ang direct materials, direct labor. Siyempre not for all, no? Pero compared to overhead, madali siyang makita. Diba? Direct materials, pwede mo siyang i-trace. Direct labor, pwede mo siyang i-trace. That's why we have the distinction when it comes to cost. Yeah, when it comes to Section D, we have costing or strategic cost management. Diba? When you compute for your costs of inventory, usually ang tawag nila sa variable costs, anong tawag sa process natin? When we assign those costs to inventory, we call that tracing. Because these are incurred para magawa yung inventory mo. Kung wala yung inventory mo, hindi naman sila na incur. So, pwede mong i-trace bawat unit of inventory. Pwede mong makita kung ilan yung labor na pinasok mo para gawin ng isang unit. Ilan ang direct materials na pinasok mo para gawin ang isang unit. So, we call that tracing. Pero, hindi pa kayo nagtaka pagdating sa fixed na costs natin. We call them, allocation siya. Because these exist whether or not you produce. Spinispread up siya. And usually, kinukuha natin sila from a lump sum na figure already. Ina-allocate na lang natin siya. Parang ganun yung thinking natin dito. So you can trace direct materials, you can trace direct labor. Pero nahihirapan tayo sa overhead because this is a sum of all of the indirect costs. Diba? The simple fact na indirect costs ang tinitignan natin, mahirap na siyang makuha. So usually, to avoid that process, kung gusto mo pa rin na actual ang costs mo, diba? Practically hindi mo siya ma-achieve for overhead. So there's a costing system na pwedeng actual ang direct materials mo, actual rin ang direct labor mo. Pero ang overhead mo, based siya sa standards. So if actual ang direct materials, direct labor mo, ang overhead mo is based to standards, that's what we call, yun yung normal cost. Okay? Alright, so yun lang naman when it comes to costing systems. Sir, ibig sabihin ba nito, pag nag-actual costing tayo, nag-normal costing tayo, standard costing, hindi na tayo pwede mag-process costing, job order costing, hindi, diba? Don't think of this as a cost accumulation system. Parang pag-label siya ng inventory. Diba? Ito yung pag-label natin ng cost for inventory. It's a costing system. Yung sinasabi mo, process costing, job order costing, those are cost accumulation systems. So, mapapag-usapan nyo yan sa Section D. Ito, yung pagpangalan natin, diba? Pag-label natin sa cost of inventory. Pero sa pagbilang ng kung ilan yung total cost ng inventory, hindi sila yung tinitignan natin. Doon na pumapasok yung alam yung process costing, job order costing, and the hybrid systems na pinagsamang process or job order costing system. Ayun, these are called cost accumulation systems. Tapos ito, costing system. Alright. So, ang tanong, eto lang ba yung merong standards? Diba? Etong costs lang ba ang merong standards? Ang sagot, hindi. So, mag-erase muna ako. Ayan. Ano pa ang costs na pwede natin lagyan ng standards? Hindi lang naman ito porket sila yung nagpapakita as cost ng inventory sa isang manufacturing firm. Diba? We also have, pati general selling and administrative expenses mo, pwede mo yung lagyan ng standards. Practically everything pwede mo lagyan ng standards. Diba? Ito kasi quantitative, financial ang usually na tinitignan natin. And yun nga, quantitative in the sense na, sorry, naubusan ako ng salita, pero what I want to say is, diba? Ito kasi yung pinaka-common na nakikita natin. Pero later on, we will also have to talk about KPIs. Factors that we don't usually think about, pero sila yung nag-capture ng kung ano yung critical sa processes natin. So it's not as simple as magkano yung financial effect. When we move forward towards KPIs, ang isang example nito is kung nagpo-produce tayo, nasa manufacturing tayo, and capital intensive. Capital intensive, don't forget that term kasi minsan tinatanong siya. We have labor intensive, marami kang tao. We have capital intensive. Ang focus mo naman is machinery. Pero syempre, kailangan mo pa rin ng tao to run that machinery. So what's the difference of KPIs tapos yung standards na usually na alam mo? Let's make this an example. Ang isang pinaka-common sa'yo, for sure, is yung quota. Diba? So we have a machine na produce siya. Tapos, ang usual na ginagamit ng business owners to evaluate yung efficiency natin is quota. Naaabot ba nila yung target na production units natin? So, definitely makikita mo yun dito, kasama yan sa budget natin, diba? Pero ang tanong ko is, lahat ba ng factor related sa quota, diba, controllable ba ng operator ng machine? But what if we're evaluating yung performance ng machine operator? Controlled niya ba lahat ng may kinalaman sa quota? Ang sagot hindi. That's why we have to move away from this moving, diba, in the long run. We have to look for more specific targets of, or specific measures of performance. And you can find that sa KPIs. We'll talk about that later. And may nabanggit rin ako, controllable. Diba? Because our target, again, ano sinabi natin kanina? When we want to push our people, there are two things that we're looking for. Yung targets natin, or yung basis natin for performance, should be effective. It should push them to go beyond what they normally think they can do. Diba? We have to help our people grow. We have to help them achieve more. Pero, they should also be fair. And a big part of being fair is, diba, it has to be controllable on their part. Pero mamaya natin papag-usapan yan. Sabihin nyo rin lang ako masyado ako maraming pinapasok na medyo malayo na. And if you want me to repeat some things, normal lang yun ha. When you're listening, minsan nawawala yung mga iba. It could also be na maliligaw yung utak mo. Normal lang yun. Please don't hesitate to tell me if I'm talking too fast. May gusto kayo na ulitin ko. Okay? Alright, okay tayo dun. So, sa ngayon, okay yung, diba? We've tackled yung standards. Do you have any questions so far? May nalilito ba sa inyo? Don't be afraid, no? Do you have any questions so far? Alright, sige. Mukhang wala naman. Now, ang haba ng usapan natin sa standards. I'll check my time. It's actually, dito sa Pilipinas, no? It's 6:44. We've been talking for about, 40 minutes. Standards pa lang to. Next question is, what does this have to do with performance evaluation? Sir, 40 minutes na tayo nag-uusap, wala ka pang binanggit na kahit anong formula for variance analysis. Yun na nga yung ginagawa natin, diba? To really appreciate what we're doing, anong kino-compute mo sa variance analysis, at least nalaman mo na okay, galing yun sa standards, galing yun sa target, diba? We set targets within our organization and we try to meet them. Hindi ka pwedeng gumawa ng variance analysis just for the sake of doing variance analysis. It always has to be, diba, a complement to you reaching your goals. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Ang variance analysis nandito siya sa check. Diba? At anong ginagawa natin sa check? We are comparing yung standards natin na linagay natin sa plan with yung actual results natin na nangyayari sa do. Diyan na pumapasok yung variance analysis. So, ayan. So, variance analysis, ano bang ginagawa natin dito? We're comparing budget versus actual. Yun lang yun. Standards versus actual. Diba? So, marami kasi natatakot sa variance analysis kasi, ang daming formula. Hindi. Diba? Iba-iba yung pangalan nila. Iba-iba yung damit nila. Ako si Franco, diba? Kanina naka-t-shirt lang ako, ngayon naka-polo. Diba? Ako pa rin naman si Franco. Iba-iba yung pangalan natin sa mga components natin. But the process is the same. Diba? Ang tubig, ilagay mo siya sa bowl, ilagay mo siya sa isang container, tubig pa rin naman yan. Ganun na ganun siya dito. The gist of what we're trying to do is this. Okay. So you set a goal. Diba? If you look at the visual representation, nakikita naman yung PowerPoint ko, no? Sorry, kanina ko pa dapat ito tinanong. Everyone can see it clearly? Gumagalaw ba ang slides? All right. Thank you very much, Leah. So, we have, diba, ito visual representation natin. Ang target natin is 120. How do we know what we need to improve? Doon pumapasok ang variance analysis. This is the target. Ano yung actual results natin? Diba? So, tignan mo to. Ayan. You have a visual representation of your target. So, that's this line, this bar. Ito yung actual results mo. Galaw ka ba o hindi? Nakita mo, di ba, nag-set ka ng target, 120, ang nabot mo lang is around 100. Diba? Yun yung mag-feed ng information sa'yo na, hey, something needs your attention. You need to do something. Pero, the next question is, how do we use these figures? Ano yung nakapresent ngayon sa screen? Those are traffic lights. Diba? And what are traffic lights? They're signals. Diba? So, very simple. Red means stop. Orange means get ready. As green means go. Pero tanong ko sa'yo, kapag green yung ilaw, may pedestrian sa harapan mo, go ka pa rin. Diba sabi, green naman yung ilaw eh. It means go. Sige, punta na ako kahit masagasaan ko yung tao. Ganun ba yun? Or, red. Red yung ilaw, pero sira naman pala yung traffic light. Diba? So, hanggang dun ka na lang habang buhay? Definitely not. These are signals that help us make decisions, but they are not the end-all be-all. Diba? They are not, how do you say this? I'm looking for a word. Hindi sila yung parang Biblia, kumbaga, diba? Hindi sila yung main porket nakita mong green, naandar ka na. You still have to use your mind because these are just signals. Kunwari, diba? You have yung favorable versus unfavorable variance. Porket favorable ba ang isang variance? Assuming na hindi nyo pa first time, no? Favorable just means maganda siya para sa'yo. Unfavorable means hindi siya nakabubuti. We'll talk about that in depth later. Pero if you see a variance that's favorable, anong ibig sabihin nito? Ibibigay ko na lahat ng managers ko. Diba? Bibigyan ko sila ng performance incentive. Now notice the language I'm using. When you talk about the CMA, when you talk about the concepts here, no, huwag niyo isipin na empleyado lang kayo. Because what you know, diba, managerial level siya. Diba? So, kayo may, huwag niyong itapon sa utak niyo kapag ganun yung language na iniisip. Always think of yourselves as people who will make decisions in the future. Kasi kaya niyo tinitake yung CMA. Diba? Anyways, sorry, nag-segue na naman ako. Porket ba favorable ang isang variance? Lahat na ng manager ko bibigyan ko ng performance bonus. Diba? Tapos pag unfavorable yung variance, lahat ng manager ko mababawasan ng sahod. Hindi sila makatanggap ng performance bonus. Ganun ba yan? Hindi. We need to look at why certain things happened. Diba? Was it in their control? And stuff like that. So signal lang siya. Okay? Specifically, these variances try to point out areas that require your attention. They do not point out courses of action immediately. Yun yung sinusubukan kong sabihin. No? Hindi ko na mahanap yung words. So, sorry na agad. Pero, if something is favorable, diba, doesn't mean that you already have to reward your people. Tapos, sasabihin mo yun. Diba? Pat yourself on the back, guys, you did well. Diba? You have to look at how it affects your business as a whole and what were the root causes of that variance. So if you look to the right of the slide, you'll see a Pareto chart. What is the Pareto principle? It simply states that 80% of the things, pinaka-basic explanation of the Pareto principle is that 80% of the effects that you see so let that sink in for a moment. 80% of the effects that you see are caused by only 20% of the causes. So there's a lot that you can pick up from this. Hindi naman siya tinatanong sa CMA exam, pero this is very important. Bakit? Kasi, if you apply this to your life, we have objectives that we want to meet. So isingit ko na yan, diba? We have something called management by objectives. Parang sa inyo ngayon, gusto niyong maging CMA at mag-exam kayo. Anong objective niyo? You want to get the high score for the CMA exam. Tulad ng sabi natin kanina, don't just reach for passing. If you have the resources for it, or even if you don't, reach for the ideal. Kung kaya niyong isipin na ipa-perfect niyo yung exam, why not? Diba? So we have an objective, and we constantly have to measure ourselves and our progress towards that objective. Nasaan na tayo? Diba? So, throughout our journey of reaching our goals, there's gonna be a lot of factors that get in our way. Marami rin tayong causes para sa mga success natin. So if you had to list them all, mauubusan ka ng oras. Saan na pumapasok yun? Diba? 80% of the reason, or 80% of what we see in our success or our failures, ang cost nila is 20%. Just like this chart, makikita mo, diba? Lahat ng defects sa isang shirt, kunwari shirt making company tayo, lahat ng defects na nakikita natin sa shirt natin, what cost them? Diba? So we have 5 reasons here. Meron ka button defect, pocket defect, collar defect, cuff defect, sleeve defect. Ang question is, for you to reach your objective, and for this particular scenario, nagpa-produce tayo ng shirt, gusto natin mabawasan yung defects natin. Where will you focus your attention? That's the main takeaway that you can get from the Pareto principle. If you want to solve 80% of the effects, don't target 100% of the causes. Because lahat ng ginagawa mo takes up resources. It takes up time. Diba? For you to succeed efficiently, diba, you have to look at ano ba yung top factors? Ano yung 20% na yun? Can you imagine if you wasted all of your effort trying to resolve 100% of the causes? Tapos, anong nangyari? 20% lang ng effects yung na-resolve. Diba? As compared if you look for what really matters para ma-solve mo yung 80%. How much time do you save? How much money do you save? Diba? How much effort do you save? And that's not something that's just for the CMA exam. Diba? You have to ask yourself, siguro after ng session natin, are you focusing on the right things? Diba? The things that will really make you succeed. And are you cutting out all of the other things that are just getting in your way or that aren't really important? Diba? So I'm not gonna preach and say na dapat mag-aaral kayo like this amount of time. No? Kayo ang dapat nakakalam niya. Diba? So, yun siya. Ano yung concept na yan when we only look at the important things? Because doon pumapasok ang variances eh. It points us towards ano ba dapat yung 20% na tinitignan natin. Diba? From 1,000 issues that you could possibly try to resolve, at least ngayon, ang papapiliin mo na lang is 200. You save a lot of time, diba? So that's something that we call management by exception. This isn't mutually exclusive with management by objectives. Hindi ka mamimili. Ano ba ako, management by objectives or management by exception? Hindi. Diba? Management by exception is simply looking at the things that matter most. So, tinitignan mo yung deviations, practical deviations from the standards or best practices. Anong ibig sabihin natin? Let me give you a practical example. If, diba, ang target mo na ma-produce 100 good units, ang standard mo lang is practical capacity tayo dito ha. Sabihin natin 10 units, hindi mo maiwasan na masira. So ano nangyari? Ang defect natin is 9 units. Mag-aaksaya ka ba ng pera? Sasabihin mo ba sa quality assurance team mo and sa production team mo, team, tignan nyo kung bakit nangyari yun. Diba? I want all hands on deck. Dapat investigate nyo from the raw material side all the way to kung kailan siya naging finished goods. Bakit tayo nagkaroon ng variance na gano'n? Would you do that? Hindi. Diba? Hindi dapat. Kasi it's within normal expectations. So ano nangyari kung dineploy mo yung mga tao mo to investigate this? Ang mangyayari, nagsayang ka ng oras, nagsayang ka ng pera. Normal lang naman pala siya eh. Hindi mo pala maiwasan. Actually, astig mo nga eh. 9 lang ang defective units mo. Normally 10 siya. Diba? You could investigate this too. Pero is it material? Diba? Sa mga auditors natin dito, diba? We have the concept of materiality. Will you really spend time and resources to look at something that's not material? As compared to kung ang normal mo is 10 units ang defective, tapos 30 units ang naging defects mo, i-deploy mo ba tao mo? Yun na, definitely, oo. So, ang point dito is, only waste effort on things that are material. Diba? Kasi, diba, ang framework natin, hindi naman tayo accounting standards eh. If you had to choose one framework, it's usually common sense and economics. Why? Because why do we have so many tools dito sa CMA? It's because we have limited resources. Diba? And how are you gonna manage those resources? Hindi naman pwedeng lahat papatulan mo. Again, tingnan mo lang yung 20%, yung pinaka-importante, para maayos mo yung 80% ng mga problema mo. Kung may extra resources, go, sige, banatan mo 100%. Pero that's never the case. So, yun yung importance nito. Meron kaming clients, no? One of the things, lalo na kung tina-target mo middle market, what happens? Usually yung mga corporations na family-owned, sino nagbabantay ng lahat? Ang president nila is a family member, tapos siya tumitingin ng lahat. Hanggang doon sa production, meron siyang say. Diba? Can you imagine if malaki yung company mo? Tapos, isang tao, kailangan niyang tignan lahat ng aspect ng isang company. Definitely, diba? You're gonna stretch someone out thin. So, kaya nga tayo may reporting lines. That's why we have low-level managers, mid-level managers, and then a distinction sa top management. We have to filter that information para effective tayo sa business unit. Diba? Alright. So, now, ayan. Anong disadvantage ng management by exception? So, variance analysis helps us perform management by exception. Again, we save a lot of time. We save resources by doing this. Pero, yun nga, you can think of it as sort of a lagging indicator. May nagtitrade ba ng commodities dito? Kunwari stocks. Diba? Pag ganun kasi, we have something called lagging indicators. These are indicators of things that have already happened. Parang ganun yung takeaway natin. This means na it shows you a signal, pero the thing that you're gonna try to solve is already in action. Diba? Medyo huli ka na sa balita. Ganun yung isipin natin when it comes to that. So, it could be na yung negative trends natin, dahil tinitignan natin siya sa isang threshold, hindi pa siya umaabot ng 30, pero it's getting there. Pero hindi pa natin siya papatulan unless nag-exceed siya ng 10. Diba? Sorry, let me illustrate that case more clearly. Kunwari, nagproduce ka, again, ang threshold mo is 10 units defective. So, anong mangyari dito? Hindi ka papatol sa variance unless lumampas siya ng 10. Ibig sabihin, kailangan mag-11 yan bago mo siya aksyonan. Diba? Pero, anong nangyari? Last month, may 5 defects tayo. Tapos naging 6. Tapos naging 7. Naging 8. At any point in time, naging 11 ba siya? Hindi. So may pinatulan ka ba? Wala. Pero, this is a negative trend. Diba? And kung titignan mo siya, it's already telling you, hey, something is happening little by little that is making us less efficient. That is causing more and more defects. Diba? What could have caused this? Bakit nagkakaroon ng trend towards more defects? Baka faulty na yung machine natin. It's showing signs of age. Kailangan niya na ng repairs and maintenance, or worst case scenario, kailangan niya ng mapalitan. Hindi mo makikita yun kasi hindi siya nag-exceed sa threshold mo. Kailangan mo siya actionan kapag naka-11 ka na. And how long will that take? Diba? So, that's one disadvantage of using management by exception. So, paano naman? Kung, di ba, ang isang reason rin why we use management by exception is because we only look at those beyond the threshold. So we save time and resources. Pero what if, ang dami palang beyond the threshold? Ang essence is, ang dami mo pa rin issues na isosolve. So, walang kwenta yung nangyayari sa management by exception natin. We weren't able to filter the 20% na hinahanap natin. Pero it's not really just a fault of management by exception. No? When we measure performance, dalawa yun eh. We measure yung mismong performance. Eto hindi naman siya tinatanong masyado sa CMA, no? Specifically. So we measure yung performance natin. But if you're interested in something like Lean Six Sigma, ayan right, titignan mo rin yung lens mo, yung mismong measurement system mo. It could also be a measure here. An error in the measurement system. So, pwedeng okay naman pala yung performance, pero anong nangyari? Yung system of measurement mo yung mali. So, it's not something explicitly stated dito sa CMA exam. Pero, yun naman yung just na ginagawa natin, diba? We are fixing the measurement system, the performance evaluation system to be fair and effective. Para, ayan, pag mineasure natin yung performance, maayos, nakaka-motivate siya, hindi siya nakakapag-resign ng tao, diba? So, minsan, we also have to look at reasonable ba yung measurement system natin? If you had to relate this to yourself, this simply means, may message kang in-evaluate. So, kunwari yung performance natin, is the way that you decode that message, kung nakipag-communicate ka, diba? Yung way ng pag-decode mo ng message na yun, tama rin ba? Diba? Kasi pwedeng okay yung message, mali lang yung interpretation mo. Ayun, that's the distinguishment between measurement systems and yung mismong pag-analyze ng performance. It could be na the way that we measure is wrong. So, iwasan nyo rin yun. Okay? Hindi naman siya specifically na tinatanong, pero it's good to include in your mindset kapag dinadaanan natin yung performance management. Alright? Sige. So, gets natin kung ano yung purpose ng variance analysis? I hope so. Okay. Ang next na papag-usapan natin. Ayan. So, meron lang akong slide dito. Medyo pa-epal siya. No? Why do I say that? Kasi, again, how do we use your figures sa variance analysis? So, sasabihin ng mga iba dyan, rewarding punishment, favorable, we have to reward our people. If unfavorable, we have to punish them. Hindi. Okay. We have to use them as a learning experience. We have to use them for improvement. Yung variances na nakita mo is feedback that we can use to further plan and execute better. So, yeah, reward and punishment is an important part of motivating and managing our people. Pero, are they the only ways that we can put improvement? Diba? So, that's something that a lot of people forget. Again, you have to investigate the causes of the variances. Tapos, i-target mo yung cause. So, again, root cause analysis, hindi naman yan tinatanong sa exam, pero it's something very important for you to understand. If you give recommendations as a future management accountant, gusto mo rin maging consultant, anong nangyayari? Diba? Para kang doctor ng isang business. And hindi ka dapat nag-cure ng symptoms, diba? So, meron kang symptoms, ayan. Kung ito yung i-cure mo, hindi naman gagaling yung pasyente mo. You are just alleviating their pain, but you're not really helping them. You have to find the root cause. Yung tunay na sakit. Yun yung isusolve mo. So, if you relate it to variance analysis, you see the signal, okay, may variance ako. Investigate mo siya. Bakit nangyari? Yun yung isolve mo. Diba? Hindi porket favorable, sige, everyone should be rewarded. Unfavorable, okay, everyone should be punished. Walang improvement na mangyayari pag gano'n. Okay? Sige. So, mag-computation na tayo ngayon. Anything that you would like to clear up? Was I too fast? Meron ba akong hindi na-explain na maayos that you want me to go back on? Okay, tubig lang ako. Wala? Alright, sige. So, doon na tayo sa computation. If you understood everything that we talked about so far, hindi ka maliligaw sa computation. Bakit? Again, it should be intuitive. We have standards, we have actual performance, kinukuha lang natin yung difference niya. And if nakakabuti siya para sa company, favorable siya. If hindi, unfavorable. So, first off, diba, we look at variances from a budgetary standpoint. So, dun muna tayo sa malaki. So, again, variances can be looked at from a variety of levels and perspectives. Ano ulit yung types of budgets natin? We have the static budget and flexible budget. Guys, the static budget is also known as what? Ito yung master budget. Nakalagay na siya dito. So, eto, nagbigay na tayo ng assumed level of activity. Diba? So, yung standards natin, may iba-ibang types, pati yung level of activity natin, meron rin. So, yung nabanggit natin kanina, may ideal, may practical, may normal. Normal, may lax. Diba? Ayun. Those are also the types of capacity that we can have. So, we have something called the master capacity. Yun lang yung capacity na ginagamit sa master budget. So when you say master capacity, ayun, yun yung capacity na ginamit to come up with a static budget. Huwag niyong kalimutan yun in case lumabas siya sa exam. No, kasi ang isang challenge sa CME exam, minsan alam mo naman mag-compute, pero iba pala yung English na ginamit. Diba? Medyo mahirap pag ganun. Nabiktima rin ako niyan. So again, this is the broadest variance. Pinakamalawak siya. Bakit? Kasi ang ginagawa mo, you have the static budget, diba? That is the first type of budget. Meron ka rin flexible budget. So, ang static budget mo, saan yan nanggaling? You have, what are the types of standards we have when it comes to yung drivers natin? We have quantity, and we have yung rate, or cost, or price. Diba? A standard volume at the standard rates will give you usually your static budget. Pero paano kung, or when we talk about quantity at this type of budget, we're talking about yung activity level. So, standard volume of activity multiplied by standard rates. Makukuha mo yung static budget mo. Pero, diba, ang sinasabi dito, it's not very useful to compare this with actual results. Kasi, baka yung sales volume yung iba. What does this mean? So, balik tayo Ang static budget is based on standard activity level multiplied by standard rates. Meron rin tayong actual results, di ba? So, kung ano talaga yung nabenta mo multiplied by the actual standards natin. Whether price or cost standards yan. Pero if you compare these two, anong sinasabi ng slide natin? Yung distortions mo could be caused by the sales volume. So, anong problema doon? Ito siya. If you expected to sell 50,000, ang cost per unit mo is sabihin natin 5. So, 5 pesos per unit. Ilan ang expected costs mo? So, this is 50,000 times 5. Sorry, may na ako sa math. Nalahint ako sa calculator. You have an expected cost of 250,000. Pero paano kung yung actual sales mo, ang galing-galing mo pala, di ba? Nagbuhos kayo ng marketing efforts na exceed nyo ang static budget sales. Umabot ka ng 100,000. Yung 100,000 mo, kahit sabihin mo walang nagbago sa standard mo, hindi mo pa tinatanong kung efficient ka talaga. Ang nag-iba lang dito ay sales volume. So kung titignan mo, times 5 pesos, magkano na ang cost mo? At may cost ka na 500,000. So i-compare mo silang dalawa. Ang expected cost mo is 250,000. Ang actual cost mo is 500,000. Anong sasabihin mo sa manager mo? Pare, inefficient ka. Dinoble mo yung expected cost natin. I have to fire you. Pare, di ba? Anong nangyari sa analysis mo? tignan mo yung per unit na cost. It could be na na-meet naman ng manager mo yung cost expectations, yung cost standards. Pero ano nangyari? Because of the difference in activity level, na-distort na yung analysis mo. So ang tanong, is this what you're supposed to use to evaluate yung managers mo? Ang sagot, diba? It can point you towards the fact that something happened and iba yung actual performance mo sa target mo. But it doesn't help you answer why. So it's not that useful of a variance to use. Diba? So how do we remove yung distortion caused by the difference in sales volume? Tanggalin mo siya entirely. What's better to compare is not static and the actual results. It should be the flexible budget. So let's refresh our memory. Ano ang flexible budget natin? The flexible budget is, diba, gagamitin mo yung standard rate. So this is a standard rate times actual activity level. Diba? Kasi ang actual mo, it goes without saying, actual activity level siya. AN, or actual quantity. At actual rates. Diba? Sorry. Sabihin nyo lang kung gusto nyo explain ko yung mga pinagsusulat ko minsan. So, ngayon, if you reflect both by actual sales level, ang kino-compare mo na lang talaga is yung mismong standards. Diba? Nawawala yung distortion caused by different activity levels. So, ayan. Yun yung sinasabi natin dito sa last sentences. We can break that down into flexible budget variance. So, the difference between actual and flexible budget. Tapos, sales volume variance. So, eto naman is, diba? Ano sabi natin? Na-distort siya by the sales volume. So, if you compare static budget with your actual results, ayun, makikita mo yung sales volume variance mo. If you remove yung rate na considerations mo, so, here's the thing. Ito yung example natin. You can do this on a per total basis. So, ang ginagawa natin dito, we're comparing actual results with the flexible budget. We're also comparing actual results with the static budget. We are also comparing, yung flexible budget with the static budget. Tanong ko sa inyo, ano naman ang nakukuha natin when we compare the flexible budget with the static budget? Diba? Same naman sila ng rates eh. Ano lang yung nag-iba? Yung sales level or yung activity level. Diba? Mga quantities. So, nagkamali pala kanina, sorry. When you compare flexible budget and static budget, dun lumalabas yung sales volume variances mo. Bakit hindi siya pwede with actual results versus static budget? Kasi may kasama kang consideration for rates. Diba? So if you want to isolate yung rates natin or yung standards natin, we only look at actual versus flexible. If you want to isolate yung effect ng sales volume, it's flexible versus static budget. Okay? Okay. So how do we do this? Marami pa tayong huhugutin, marami pa tayong i-work back. No. If you're given whole budgets, if you're given all of the actual results, it's as simple as, tignan mo to sa actual results mo, meron kang unit sold na 20,000. Sa flexible budget mo, 20,000 na. Is this a coincidence? Hindi. Kasi your flexible budget is your standards restated at the actual volume of activity. Ang static budget mo, eto na yung based sa master capacity mo. Diba? Sabi mo nung una, 24 yung mabibenta mo. Pero very rarely do our sales estimates, very rarely do our actual results reach our estimates. Diba? Either sumasobra siya or bumababa. Diba? So, ano nga gawin natin dito? What if I want to get the flexible budget variance for revenues? Ang gawin mo lang, actual revenues less flexible budget revenues. Ano ang difference dito? Parehas lang yung sales volume nila. So, ang sabi natin kanina, revenue is generated by only two things. You have the volume, you have the price. So, tinanggal mo yung consideration on the volume. Parehas lang naman sila ng unit, so anong matitira dito? When you look at the difference between 2.5 million and 2.4 million, so that's 100,000, you're only looking at the price. See, that's what happens when you compare the actual results with the flexible budget. Diba? Nawawala yung effect ng sales volume. So ang tanong ko, diba, based on the units sold na 20,000, kung ang standard price mo ang masusunod, may kikitain ka sana ng 2.4 million. Pero ano nangyari dito? Kumita ka ng 2.5 million. Meron kang extra or kulang? Extra, di ba? Linampasan mo yung 2.4 million. Meron kang extra 100,000. Tumaas yung sales mo compared sa ina-expect mo. Nanalo ka ba o natalo? Nanalo ka. Diba? So, yun yung tinatawag natin na favorable. Even before you compute a variance, when you actually look at the data behind it, kasi mamaya makakakita ka eh, when we go to cost variances, we use 7 hours, pero dapat 5 hours lang. Wala ka pang kinocompute na actual ha? Wala ka pang kinocompute na financial effects. Kung itatanong kita, were you efficient or were you inefficient? 5 ang kailangan, sumobra ka ng 7 hours. Sumobra ka. And that means natataas yung cost mo. Even before you compute a financial figure from this, malalaman mo na dapat, okay, this means na inefficient tayo. If you are inefficient, kasi sumobra ka sa oras, nanalo ka na talo ka. Talo ka. Yun naman ang tinatawag natin na unfavorable. Okay? Later on, we have a way para pag-compute kayo, magiging procedural siya. And you don't have to analyze. Pero habang natututo tayo, dapat marunong kayong mag-analyze. Variances come from whether favorable or unfavorable siya sa company. And for that, you can use your common sense. Pero again, the CMA is a time-based exam. You have to answer 100 multiple choice questions bago ka pa mag-essay. Diba? Usually 8 essay questions yun. And you only have about 3 hours. Diba? So may mga bagay talaga na kailangan natin gawing procedural. Idadaan natin siya sa formula para hindi na tayo mag-isip. Mamaya makikita nyo kung paano agad makita kung favorable or unfavorable ang isang bagay. So, ayan. Gets ba natin? So, ang next kasi dito is paano natin i-compute yung variances? Diba? Nagpakita na ako ng sample. You only have to compare yung pinakitang figure, diba? Yung dalawang pinakitang figures. So, diba? Gawin na natin. Ang flexible budget variance mo, under this sales level na 20,000, you would have, ang expectation mo, kikita ka ng 2.4 million. Pero kumita ka ng 2.5 million. I-minus mo lang yung 2.4 sa 2.5. Revenue siya. Kung ang revenue mo nag-exceed sa target mo, panalo ka ba o talo ka? Panalo ka syempre. So, favorable ang variance mo, 100,000. Pag sa cost naman, iba yung analysis mo. Ang expected mo sa sales level na to, 1.2 million lang ang direct materials cost mo. Pero nag 1,243,200 ka. What does this mean? Nag-over ka sa budget mo ng direct materials. Ibig sabihin, hindi ka efficient sa paggamit mo ng materials. So, ayan. Unfavorable ka. Kasi you spent more than you were expecting to spend. So, nakita mo yung difference ha? Revenues, the higher you go beyond your target, the better. Sa cost, baliktad. You want to go below your target. You want to go below your budget. Okay? So, ganun lang siya. Ganun yung analysis. Iko-compare mo lang yung figures. And then, yung total, nalalabas na yung total effect niya. Yeah. We have the total flexible budget variance. Diba? Very easy. Very intuitive. Ganun rin sa static budget variances. Ano naman yung kinompare natin dito? We compared yung static and then yung actual. So, ganun rin lang siya on a budget level. It's 2,880,000 less 2.5 million. So, originally, magbebenta ka sana ng 24,000 units. Pero, ang nabenta mo lang is 20,000. So, makikita mo rin yung effect niya dito. Plus, diba? Sa static, standard price ang gamit mo dyan. Pero sa actual, diba, baka iba yung actual presyo na ginamit mo. So, embodied yan dito sa static budget variance mo for revenue. Okay? How do we isolate yung effect niya na volume lang? Kasi dito sa flexible budget variance, rate lang. Again, nasaan? Diba? Ulit-ulit lang para tumatak sa inyo. Masanay rin kaya. Saan ulit natin mahanap? Ayan. Ang flexible budget versus static budget na analysis mo. So, yung 4.8 ay etong 480,000 na unfavorable. That is yung original na sales plan mo. Diba, sales target mo na 24,000. Pero 20,000 lang ang nabenta mo. Kaya yung variance niya, yung 480,000 na yan, walang kinalaman yan sa rate ha. Kasi parehas ang kino-compare mo eh. Again, actual results is actual quantity times actual rate. Ang flexible budget mo is actual quantity times standard rate. Tapos, static mo is standard quantity at standard rate. Diba? Gas-gas na siya, no? So, hopefully, hindi nyo makalimutan to. If you compare static budget and flexible budget, anong matitira? Hindi mo kino-compare yung standard rate kasi pareha silang andyan. Ang kino-compare mo is quantities. So, itong 480,000 na to, that's the effect of the difference in quantities sold. Diba? Yung actual results mo versus flexible budget, parehas lang naman yung quantity. So, hindi mo yung kino-compare. Ang kino-compare mo is actual rate and standard rate. So, itong 100,000 na favorable, ibig sabihin, favorable yung rate mo. Diba? Pag pinagsama mo, actual minus static budget diretso, yun na yung static budget variance mo. This embodies both the quantity and the rate. It also, diba, another way that you can solve it, aside from 288 million less 2.5 million is 408,000 less yung 100,000. You will also get 380,000. Diba? Siyempre, unfavorable yung isa favorable. So, parang integers yan, diba? Negative, inad mo sa isang positive number, parang nag-subtract ka rin. So, ganun yung dating niya, kaya 380 siya. Baka may nagtataka sa inyo, bakit hindi 580? Kasi yung isa, negative, yung isa, positive. Gets diba? Ganun lang yung gist niya. So, what is the total static budget variance? Ayan. Dito natin siya nakuha. We have 216 yung operating income dapat natin. Pero, ilan lang ba yung kinita natin na operating income? So, 216 minus 29,800. Ayan. Diba? Eto dapat kita natin. Profit yan, ha? Sa profit, ano yung rule natin? The more the merrier. Diba? Or, mas gusto nyo mas mababa yung profit? Definitely, mas gusto nyo mas mataas. So, ganun na. Parang revenue rin ang analysis natin sa variances niya. You go beyond the budget, that's good. Di mo mabot yung budget, that's bad. E ano nangyari? Abot ba natin yung 216? Hindi. 29,800 lang ang kinita natin. So, anong ibig sabihin nung talo tayo? It's unfavorable immediately bago ka pa mag-compute. And so, unfavorable siya, and it is 216 minus 29,800. Ayan. It is, yung total static budget variance natin amounts to 186,200. Unfavorable. Gets ba natin yung sa variances natin? Okay siya? Alright. So, how do we make this more procedural? Ayan. Eto na. When you calculate variances, gawin yung habit na actual minus budget. Diba? Ang makukuha niyong variance, ito yung analysis key natin ha. If positive siya for an income item, income, so revenue or profit, the more the merrier, di ba? Kung negative siya, ibig sabihin, mas mababa yung actual kaysa sa budget. Diba? Pag negative siya, unfavorable. Pag positive siya, ibig sabihin, mas mataas ang actual mo kaysa sa budget. Favorable siya. Diba? Pero opposite yun kapag expense. Diba? Or cost. Kasi gastos mo yan eh. Bakit mas gustuhin mo mas marami yung gastos mo? So, kung positive siya, ibig sabihin, mas malaki yung actual kaysa sa budget mo. Ayan. Unfavorable yan. Because you spent more than you expect to spend. Pag negative siya, ayan, ibig sabihin, mas unti yung actual na ginastos mo kaysa sa in-expect mong igastos. Talo ka, panalo ka. Panalo ka. So, favorable siya. Ganun lang kasimple. Diba? So, idagdag niyo yan, yung analysis niyo yan, plus a little bit of common sense, and hindi kayo mawawala. Diba? I don't want anyone with any topic na meron talagang mga topics na challenging for some people kasi hindi sila in line sa natural competencies natin. Normal lang yun. Iba-iba tayo ng strengths. Iba-iba tayo ng weaknesses. Kung nagkataon na weakness mo ang computation, logical analysis, diba? It doesn't mean na hindi mo siya ma-overcome. Kaya nga tayo nag-aaral. Kaya tayo nagpa-practice. Diba? So, practice lang, and you have to change your mindset. Don't ever say that something is too hard for you. Nothing is too hard for you kasi ito gawa to ng tao eh. Diba? Kung gawa siya ng tao, kaya nyo rin siya kaputi. Diba? You just need time, you just need patience. Diba? You need effort. Kapag binuhos mo yun, diba? Maybe it might take you longer than others to achieve. Pero there will be a day na hindi mo na masasabing masyado nang mahirap. Pwede mong sabihin na challenging, pero kaya mo yan. So you have to change that mindset as early as now. Ha? Kung may topics kayo na nahihirapan, wag mo sabihin na hindi nyo kaya. Alright? Alright. So, later on, to facilitate yung speed ng discussion natin, I won't always say you have to talk about the actual quantity or I won't type it out. So meron tayong abbreviations. Pag nakita niyo rin sila sa exam, at least hindi kayo malilito. So, AQ, actual quantity, SQ, standard quantity. For the actual level of output, this is very important ha, kasi moving forward, we will deal with cost variances. So, cost variances, hindi rin natin tinitignan yung sales level ha. Nasa loob tayo ng flexible budget. So, that might confuse you, kasi yung exercise natin kanina is comparing the whole of the actual results with the flexible budget. Baka isipin nyo, nandun na lahat ng rate variances. Hindi. Diba? Hindi ibig sabihin na ganun yung comparison point natin. Wala na tayong quantity variances. Kasi within each individual unit, diba? Ang tinanggal mo lang is sales volume. Ang tinanggal mo lang yung factor ng activity level. Pero, nandun pa rin yung per unit na standards. What do I mean by this? Sige, originally, gusto mo magbenta ng 50,000 units, ang actual na nabenta mo is 100,000 units. Diba? Kung i-restate mo para sa flexible budget, mawawala yung distortion ng master capacity. Ang matitira na lang is wala ka na talagang tinitignan sa difference ng activity level. Pero, within each individual unit na nabenta mo, meron ka pa rin standards. So, kunwari, sa 100,000 units na yan, per unit, ang standard ko is dapat ang direct materials ko is 5. So, ang quantity niya at ang rate niya dapat 5 pieces. Ang rate niya dapat 2 pesos. Per unit yan. So, it could be na, sige, walang deviation pagdating sa sales level mo. Pero, sa 100,000 units, ilan dapat yung quantity mo? Dapat meron kang ginamit na 500,000 units ng raw material. Yan yung quantity mo. Dapat yung rate mo rin is still 2 pesos. So, 500,000 times 2, ilan yan? Bigla akong nag-reach ng calculator. So, this is 1 million. still be possible na yung direct materials budget mo hindi siya na-meet. Diba? Kasi ito yung base sa direct materials budget mo, diba? Sa flexible budget. Pero what if 1 million, ay 1.2 million ang actual na direct cost mo? Possible ba yun? Ang sagot, possible yan. Paano? It could be na we produce 100,000 units, pero imbis na 5 raw materials per unit ang ginamit natin, nag-6 pala tayo. Or, bumili tayo ng mas mahal na raw material. So, mas quality pala siya, kaya mas mababa yung quantity na nagamit natin, pero mas mahal siya. And ang net effect niya is, mas mahal pa rin siya by 200,000. Nakahabol ba kayo? Ganun, what I really want to say here is that, iba yung effect ng sales level. It could be na walang distortion because of sales level, pero on a per unit level, nag-deviate tayo from the cost standards. That's very possible. It happens all the time. Diba? So yun actual level of output dapat. So standard quantity for the actual level of output, and if you have standards, the standard quantity and then actual quantity, meron ka ng actual price, standard price. Atong was spam, parang galit na spam na nagkakarate. Tapos WAS, PSM. Diba? So, abbreviation siya, weighted average standard price of the actual mix. Tapos, meron naman yung weighted average standard price of the standard mix. We use these two kapag meron kang multiple inputs. So, you could have them for sales, you could have them for costs. Right? For cost, this is multiple inputs. For sales, this is usually multiple products. Diba? Marami kang products na binibenta, so lahat sila nagko-contribute sa revenue mo. Pero ano yung mix nila? Diba? Ano yung ratio and proportion nila that makes up the total sales? So, meron tayo at actual mix, yung actual na nabenta mo, meron rin yung at budgeted or standard na mix. Yun na nga. Paano mo siya ginagamit? So, may example tayo later. Doon rin natin siya makikita. No? How do we compute for variances? Ayun, parang yung pinakita ko rin kanina. You have yung sinabi natin kanina, di ba? Actual results versus flexible versus static budget. Di ba ganito rin yung analysis niya? When you go on a per unit level, hindi nawawaling analysis na ganun ha. Hindi nga lang siya flexible versus static budget or something like that. Tinitignan na lang natin, actual na nagastos, diba? Parang flexible budget yung tingin niya. Pero we have actual quantity multiplied by the standard rate. Kung etong dalawa yung kinumpare mo, parang actual versus flexible budget rin kanina, you get the... Okay, so spending yung nalagay ko dito. Kasi kinapi ko sa isang slide about yun nga, diba? Overhead variances. Pag overhead variances, we call them spending. Pero this could be variable spending or rate or price. Tapos, eto tama to. If you compare naman actual quantity and standard rate multiplied by, again, standard rate multiplied by standard quantity, you get yung efficiency. Efficiency, or can also be called usage, or ang pinaka-generic is yung quantity variance. Gets? Alright. So, anong gagawin natin dito? Diba? We have to make this distinction. Baka kasi nalulula kayo na, ang dami namang letters na kailangan tandaan. Hindi naman. It's simple as this. If walang effect yung quantity sa analysis mo, ang kino-compare mo lang is price or rate. Diba? Actual rate minus standard rate. Ayun, you're computing for rate, price, or spending variances. But if wala namang kwenta is standard rate, kasi existent sila sa dalang kino-compare mo, ang kino-compare mo lang is quantities. Diba? Standard quantities less actual quantities, then you get yung efficiency, quantity, or usage variance. So you can simplify these formulas. You have For efficiency or usage, meron kang, ano ba yung common dito? It's the rate. So standard rate multiplied by the quantity of, ayan, actual quantity minus standard quantity. Diba? On the other hand, ano yung common? It is actual quantity. So actual quantity multiplied by the difference of standard rate or actual rate and standard rate. Yan, gawin pala nating habit ha. Actual muna. So actual rate minus standard rate. Diba? Ang dali lang pala. Meron tayong medyo different dito, diba? When it comes to fixed costs. So ang fixed cost natin, usually kasi, again, ano ang difference nila? Ang variable cost, nagbabago ba yan with activity? Yes. Diba? The more that you produce, the more na tumataas siya. Pero ang fixed cost, tumataas ba yan with levels of activity? Ideally, hindi. Within the relevant range, hindi. Constant lang yan. So, anong kino-compare mo? Kung ano yung binudget mo, compared sa ano yung actual na ginastos mo. Ayun, yun yung spending. May rate ka bang pinapag-usapan dito? Actually, wala. Kasi ang fixed nga, hindi naman yun nagbabago when it comes to activity levels. Isang lump sum na yan. And kapag kinumpare mo yung actual versus budgeted, whether flexible or static budget, again, nagbabago ba ang fixed cost natin? With levels of activity, hindi. So, kung anong budget man yan, basta kung ano yung binudget mo na fixed cost versus actual, fixed spending na yan. Why do we have something called the capacity or volume variance? Now, ano rin yung isang perspective natin with the types of standards? Diba? We have ideal, we have practical, we have normal, we have lax. Ayun. Pumapasok rin yan sa pag-determine natin ng overhead rate. So, kung meron, how do we determine yung overhead rate ba? Usually, meron tayong estimate ng isang total. So, for fixed overhead, sabihin natin, we expect to have fixed overhead of 500,000. Anong gagawin mo dito? Kailangan mo siyang i-allocate per unit. And saan siya manggagaling? Doon nga sa capacity mo. So, pwede naman na ang expected capacity mo na practical standards ka. Kunwari. So, ang pinaka-practical na ma-achieve natin is 100,000 units. So, eto lang siya. You'll talk about this more sa section D, pero it's as simple as yung cost pool natin or yung total cost that we expect to be incurred divided by the cost driver. Or sabihin natin or the capacity. Diba? Mas maganda. Makakuha mo yung rate mo. So, ang application rate mo for overhead is 5 pesos. Diba? Anong gagawin mo dyan sa 5 pesos na yan? Every time na mag-produce ka, nagre-record ka ng, nagre-recognize ka ng fixed overhead na 5 pesos. Pero, ano yung nagbabago dito? Pwede naman kasi na yung expected capacity mo is not the same as your actual production. Diba? It's not, hindi nga pwede yung term eh. Most likely, hindi yan pareho. Kaya, the way that you applied yung variance mo might not be appropriate. Kasi yun nga, diba? Ang kino-compute mo talaga dito sa volume variance is what is the difference between yung expected capacity level ko versus actual na capacity level. So sabihin natin, ang actual na na-produce natin is 80,000. Ang gagawin mo na dito, overhead application rate multiplied by what? Yung hindi mo na-apply na 20,000 units, diba? So, saan galing yung 20,000? 100,000, akala mo, ganyan yung mapoproduce mo or mabibenta mo. Ang na-produce or nabenta mo lang is 80,000. So, yung difference nun multiplied by your application rate, that will usually give you your capacity or volume variance. Okay? Okay, so ganun lang naman siya. Dami kong pinagsusulat, no? Pero, this is another question. Yung mga iba kasi, hindi, sige. Mamaya natin papag-usapan na. Na-excite lang ako. So, sorry. Marami naman tayong slides dyan eh. Again, ano yung purpose ng variances natin? They are signals that help us ask better questions so that we know what we can do better for the future. Again, variances are signals that help us ask better questions that will aid us in achieving our goals in the future. Diba? So, nakita mo kanina, nung kinumpare mo lang yung actual results as a whole compared sa static budget, pwede mo sabihin, hindi ko na-meet yung target operating income ko. Hindi ko na-meet yung direct materials budget ko, labor budget, overhead budget. But can you ask, bakit hindi ko na-meet? Diba? Is that something that we can see when we compare the actual results with the static budget? The answer is no. So when we look deeper down, diba, and we compare standard costs, ayan, the gist is, we're able to ask more intelligent questions. Diba exciting siya? Ayan. So makita natin mamaya. So, ano yung types of variances natin? So, mag-start muna tayo sa costs. So sa cost or manufacturing input variances natin, we have direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. Usually, ito lang kasi yung pinapasolve sa atin. So, dito, ikot yung usapan natin. So, what are the types of variances that we can have for each? We can have, ayan, a total, di ba? I-compare mo yung price or yung rate at yung quantity. So, actual price and quantity versus standard price and quantity. Ayan, you'll get the total. Pero kung hihiwalayan mo lang, ito yung napag-usapan natin kanina, there's nothing new. So, huwag kayo ma-intimidate, ha? Yung actual rate minus standard rate, ayan, you have the price or rate variance. Actual quantity minus standard quantity, you have your quantity or usage or variance. Now, ayan, para lang makita nyo. So, ang total variance nyo, this is yung actual rate times actual quantity minus your standard rate or standard quantity. Ayan. Price or rate variance, ito na pag-usapan natin kanina. This is actual rate minus standard rate multiplied by the standard quantity kasi kailangan mo pa rin siyang i-project kung ano yung total effect ng variance. Sorry, mali. Actual quantity. Kasi yun yung actual na ginamit. Yun yung tinitingnan natin. Quantity, usage, or efficiency variance, ito naman na you're comparing quantity. So, standard rate ka dapat para hindi ka ma-distort ng actual rate. Sorry, napagod. Joke lang. So, ang ginagawa mo dito, actual quantity minus standard quantity. Ayan. Ano yung naka-blue? Diba? Eto, sanay na kayo dito. Ang dali lang palang isipin, diba? Ano tong naka-blue? Hindi siya masyadong common, lalo na kung ang background nyo is yung Philippine CPA board exams. We don't really compute for this that much. Pero meron siya. Diba? Yung naka-blue, these are for companies with multiple inputs. Kunwari, hindi ka lang, diba? Raw materials, for example. So, usually these exist sa direct materials and direct labor. Pwede naman sa direct materials. Meron material A, B, and C. Diba? May ratio and proportion kang dapat sundan dyan. Minsan, hindi nasusunod. That's the mixed variance. Meron naman, tatanggalin mo yung effect ng ratio and proportion, titignan mo lang talaga yung mismong quantity na pinasok mo. So, hindi mo na tinitignan yung ratio, i-restate mo yung ratio para as if standard siya, compare mo dun sa budget mo. What I mean is, ang ina-expect mo is kapag nagpasok ka or magproduce ka ng 100,000 units, ang gagamitin mo is 50,000 na direct materials. Pero ang nagamit mo pa ng direct materials is how much? It is 60,000 pala. If you don't look at the mix, the ratio proportion, ang kino-compare mo lang is yung mismo yield ng outputs. Diba? To achieve that same 100,000. Ayan, yun yung tinatawag natin na yield variance. So, okay, mag-alala. We'll go into depth with that later. Dito na ginagamit yung WASPAM. Tapos, diba? Parang ihi yung isa, WASPSUM. Joke lang. Ang paliw lang. So, ayan. Saan natin sisimulan? Let's talk about direct materials first. So, ano ba kasi yung tinitignan natin sa direct materials? Diba? You buy yung direct materials mo. And then you use them into production. So, you have two types of standards here. Hindi nagbabago. Diba? You have quantity, you have price or rate. And you can have multiple inputs, so you have mix and yield as well. So, ano yung kwento niya? If you purchase direct materials, meron tayong standard kunwari. Usually, ang puro practical kasi na. So, sabihin natin nag-historical rate tayo. Usually, pag bumibili tayo sa vendors natin, we buy it for 10 pesos. Now, ang quantity or usage natin, do we look at how much we buy? Usually, hindi. Or actually, what we look at is usage. Diba? Ilan yung ginamit natin. So, per unit, sasabihin natin, we use, 5 units of direct materials. Ito yung standard natin. So, kailan tayo nagkakaroon ng price or rate variance? We have a price or a rate variance kapag, diba, meron tayong material, 10 pesos dapat siya. Pero, nag-sale pala. Nabili natin at a bulk. Diba? May discounted siyang price na 8 pesos per unit. So, meron ka ng price or rate variance na magkano? Per unit, you have 2. Did you pay more or did you pay less? You paid less. Kasi 10 siya, usually. 8 mo lang nakuha. Meron kang favorable price variance na 2 pesos. Ganun siya. Paano mo siya ipapakita? Please look at this journal entry. So usually, nagre-record tayo at the point of purchase. Kasi, ang standard, again huwag niyo kakalimutan, kaya ang dami nating variances. Kasi this is under the assumption na gumagamit tayo ng standard costing. So kung nag-standard costing ka, paano mo i-record ang direct materials mo? That will be at standard price. Okay? Standard price yan. Pero, yung binayad mo, is the standard mo rin. Hindi, diba? Binayaran mo na yung vendor mo or nag-incur ka na ng utang sa kanya. Hindi mo naman siya babayaran at yung standard eh. Tingnan mo kung yun yung gagawin mo, babayaran mo siya worth 10 pesos per unit. Pero ang sinisingil niya lang sa'yo, 8 pesos per unit. Hindi, diba? Babayaran mo siya kung ano yung sinisingil sa'yo. And that's 8 pesos. So, actual price yan. Notice, if hindi parehas ang standard price sa actual price, magkakaroon ka na ng discrepancy. Saan mo siya i-record? Ang journal entry niya, diba, saan ka magko-compensate? Ang balancing figure mo, ilagay mo na sa direct materials price variance. So, anong mangyayari? Kung mas mataas yung actual price sa standard price, edi, anong nangyayari doon? Or tingnan natin yung example na to muna habang nandito pa siya sa utak natin. Mas mababa yung actual price mo sa standard price mo. Favorable or unfavorable? It is favorable. Diba? So, magre-record ka, saan mo siya i-offset? Mas mababa yung actual, diba? And mas mataas yung standard price mo. So, mas malaki yung debit mo initially kaysa sa credit mo. To balance that, mag-credit ka ng direct materials price variance. Sir, bakit ko siya credit? Diba? Para lang mag-balance. Pag ganun, ang sinasabi pa natin, expense, ang favorable variance, hindi naman. Saan mo kasi i-close lahat ng variances mo? I-close mo sila, dalawa lang naman yan eh. It's, if you're familiar with how you treat spoilage sa cost accounting, parang ganun siya. If it's material, i-prorate mo siya sa yung work in process and sa yung cost of goods sold. Pero kung hindi naman siya ganun ka-material, i-bound mo na siya dito sa cost of goods sold. So ano mangyayari kapag meron kang favorable variance? Di ba, malalagay siya sa credit. Eh ano ba ang COGS? Credit, di ba? Hindi, sorry. Nagloko ako dun. Expense siya. So, debit siya. Ano mangyayari? Paano mo ba kinuklose ang variances? So, sabihin natin meron tayong price variance. Naka-credit yan, di ba? Paano mo tatanggalin ang naka-credit kung favorable siya? Favorable siya, initially credit. Para tanggalin siya, kailangan mo siyang i-debit. At, so sabihin natin magko-close na tayo ng variances. You have to debit yung variance mo. Saan mo siya credit? Wala lang. Wala. Pag variances, magsi-single entry ako. Ganun ba yun? Hindi. Diba? May credit siya and kino-close mo siya tulad ng sinabi natin. Either pin-operate mo siya or usually binabaon mo na siya sa cost of goods sold. So, credit mo ang cost of goods sold. In essence, nadagdagan or nabawasan ang cost of goods sold? Nabawasan. Diba? So, anong nangyari? Yung favorable price variance mo, later on, babawasan niya yung cost of goods sold. Kung unfavorable siya, i-record mo siya sa debit, diba? I-close mo siya sa cost of goods sold, ibig sabihin, baliktad naman yung entry niya. So, madadagdagan yung cost of goods sold. Hindi ko naman siya na-encounter sa CMA exam na ganito kalalim yung tanong sa variance, no? Pero at least na-appreciate natin yung journal entries. Pati sa batch ko, no? Mamaya sa inyo, ang dami pa ng ganyan na question. At least alam natin. Paano naman yung usage? So okay tayo sa purchase price variance. Ang nangyari, bumili tayo, iba yung presyo na ina-expect natin kaysa sa actual price. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng price variance. Kailan ang timing ng usage variance? Kapag kailan mo siya, diba, nagamit. Kaya nga usage variance. So ang tinitignan na natin dito, kung kanina price, ngayon ang tinitignan natin yung quantity na ginamit natin for each unit. Diba? So ano bang nakaka-apekto nito? Mamaya inisip nyo, sir, parang ang stupid naman yan. Kung 5 na ngayon sinabing gagamitin, bakit ako gagamit ng 7? Diba? Ang dali-dali lang naman sundan nun. Pero, diba, pag nagpo-produce tayo, nagkakaroon tayo ng spoilage. Kakaroon tayo ng wastage. Diba? So, nagkakaroon ng scenarios wherein, ideally, para ma-achieve ang 100,000 units, kailangan natin gumamit ng 5 per raw material. 5 na raw material per unit. Ang gagamitin dapat natin is 500,000. Pero anong nangyari? Para ma-achieve yung 100,000 units na yan, hindi pala tayo ganun ka-efficient. Hindi pala ganun ka-effective yung quality management systems natin. Ano nangyari? Meron tayong defects. Sabihin natin umabot ng 20,000 ang defect natin. Kahit na sabihin mo na same unit pa rin or same raw materials quantity ang ginamit mo per unit, ano nangyari? Meron kang 20,000 units na sayang. So 20,000 times 5, diba? Kano yun? May additional kang 100,000, hindi ba? So that's also a way which we can incur yung usage variances natin. Gets? Ayan. So ang timing niya, nagamit mo siya. So, syempre, ang work in process mo, papasok mo yan at standard quantity. Bakit, sir, hindi mas pinasify na standard rate mo siya? Kasi the moment na yung direct materials, recognize mo, naka-standard price na yan. So, work in process at standard quantity, tapos i-compare mo siya sa direct materials at the actual quantity na nagamit mo. Again, magkakaroon ka ng discrepancy. The debit or credit, that will be your balancing figure. Ito naman is direct materials usage variance. Gets? Alright. So mukhang may chat dito. No? Alright, can you repeat that bit for fixed capacity variance explanation. Alright, sige sir. Now, diba? Tapos tayo sa direct materials variance. For your benefit, balikan lang muna natin kasi napag-usapan natin yung usage and quantity dito sa direct materials, diba? Hindi parehas yun for fixed overhead. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Pero, pagdating sa variable cost, so direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead, diba? Most likely parehas lang yung way kung paano sila i-compute. Again, same process, nag-iba lang yung pangalan, nag-iba yung damit, terminology, pero the process is the same. Pero for fixed overhead, wala tayong quantity or usage variance. Okay? Oops, nag-next na agad siya. Ayan. So, wala tayo, hindi siya nag-depend to. Alright. Wala tayong quantity or usage variance. For fixed overhead, what do we have? We have volume variance. Okay. Is this a measure of how efficient we work with our operations? Hindi. It is a measure of if we met yung expectations natin when it comes to activity level. Activity level, diba? Production level or sales level. So, ang tinitignan mo dyan is if I expected to produce 100,000, ang na-produce ko lang is 80,000. Meron akong sales volume variance of how much? 20,000. So we know dito sa mga variable cost natin how to see if it's favorable or unfavorable. Diba? You spent more than you expected to spend, unfavorable na. You spent less, syempre favorable, diba? Kasi may cost savings ka. Pero, when it comes to the volume variance, what are you asking? Did we meet the estimated capacity? Did you meet the estimated capacity? You expected to produce 100. Ang produce mo lang is 80,000. Hindi. Hindi mo siya na-meet, diba? By 20,000. This is automatically unfavorable. Bakit? Kasi ang expectation is dapat na-meet mo yung 100,000. Bakit hindi ka nakapag-produce ng 100,000? Pero, definitely, para sa inyo, may nakikita na kayong mali doon. Kasi dito, diba, ang ganda ng analysis sa direct materials. Maybe we purchase something that's more expensive, that's less expensive. Maybe we're not efficient, kaya we use more direct materials than we should have. Ano pang pwede nating analysis sa direct materials? What if mataas yung rate na nakuha natin? Sinubstitute natin yung raw materials na we usually use, gumamit tayo ng higher quality. And usually, diba, ang case natin is if higher quality ang materials mo, your price will be higher. Pero, ano mangyayari? Diba? Sa kapalit ng mas mataas na presyo, think more quality anymore. Maybe 4 or 3 units and achieve the same level of quality and functionality with your product. Diba? So, pwede naman yun eh. If you see na, unfavorable price variance naman on the other hand. So, our purchasing officers bought something less expensive. Pero yun pala, anong nangyari sa usage variance? We had to use more. Sige, anong interpretation nyo dyan? At first glance, this tells me na our purchasing officers bought something cheaper, pero it was cheap because its quality was not up to par. Kaya siguro nagkaroon tayo ng mas maraming defects and mas marami tayong nagamit. Or, diba, it needed more units kahit wala tayong defects, pero kailangan niya ng mas maraming units para ma-maintain yung same quality, yung same integrity, diba, ng product natin. So, ganun yung analysis dito. Ganun rin mamaya sa direct labor. Diba? Maybe we hired more competent professionals. Kaya, unfavorable yung rate variance natin. Pero, because they were high-quality professionals. For example, sa firm, meron kang associate compared sa senior associate. Ang senior associate can do, ideally, Ideally, they can do much more than the associate. Pero mas mataas yung bayad mo sa kanila. Mas mataas yung asking rate nila. So, nag-hire ka ng mas competent, mas marami kang binayaran sa kanya, pero natapos niya ng mas mabilis yung trabaho. Kasi mas marami siyang experience, mas marami siyang alam. Ideally, diba? Scenario lang naman. Bakit naka-encounter na rin kayo ng time na mas magaling pa kayo sa senior niyo or may na-promote kayo senior na hindi niya alam ginagawa niya. Huwag niyo yung i-factor sa exam, ha? Diba? Very surface level lang naman ang hinihingi sa atin sa CMA. Minsan, nadadali pa tayo, kaka-overthink. So, may mga analysis tayong ganun. Do you see how useful variance analysis can be? Wala pa tayo sa KPIs, ha? These are very generic measurements. Pero it can already tell you a lot. But what does it tell us kapag meron tayong volume variance? When we have a volume variance, ano nangyari? Sinasabi natin, we did not meet the expected capacity. Is that good or bad? Sasabihin mo, production manager, bakit hindi ka nag-produce? Ganun ba yung gagawin natin? Sagot hindi. Diba? Kasi ano dapat yung rule natin? How do we maximize profits economics? Diba? We maximize profit, or we maximize revenue pala, when we reach the point wherein marginal revenues are equal to marginal cost. In simple terms, diba? Yung effort natin sa pagbenta, diba? Yung cost na na-incur natin to make that additional sale should not exceed the revenue that we get in that sale. In even simpler terms, diba? Yung effort na pinapasok mo, only if there is a demand. You should only produce if there is a demand. It's very intuitive. Diba? Bakit ako magproduce ng 100,000 kung ang bumili lang talaga sa akin is 80,000? Ang sinasabi ba natin, we should penalize yung managers natin? We should, or it is unfavorable for managers not to create excess inventories? Eh di ba waste yun when it comes to lean manufacturing? Kapag nagproduce ka, nag-overproduce ka, that's one waste. But you're producing more than is necessary. What will this lead to? Mas marami kang inventories na kailangan i-store. May storage cost yan. Diba? May opportunity cost ka rin for storing other things that are revenue generating. Kailangan mo pang ng upkeep. Diba? Tapos, baka kung hindi mo benta lahat yan, magkaroon ka ng spoilage, obsolescence. Diba? So, how come unfavorable pa rin siya? Diba? Ayun na nga. This is one of the variances that you will see later on. Hindi naman siya ganun ka. Diba? It can be used in analysis. Definitely. Diba? Sino may kasalanan dyan? Hindi naman tayo. Sa production. Kasi we're talking about cost or manufacturing inputs. Hindi naman si production manager yung may kasalanan. Bakit hindi niya na-meet yung estimated capacity? Pero it could be used to evaluate, sales and marketing. Diba? Bakit hindi nyo na-meet ang sales goal nyo? Kaya tuloy meron tayong volume variance. Diba? Pwede naman yun. Pero in terms of cost or manufacturing inputs, ayan, hindi siya fair. Hindi siya fair. Hindi siya controllable. So, bakit mo siya gagamitin to evaluate yung mga production manager natin? Diba? So, yun lang naman. Certainly, clear ba yung sa fixed capacity variance natin? We will still talk about it later. No? May example tayo on how to solve. Pero concept-wise, was I able to make it clearer to you? Okay, sige. So, I'm happy. Now, everyone, no? Okay, if you have questions, right, you have to ask them. No? You have to. And I have the responsibility to answer them. If I can't find the answer right now, the brain fart ako, kunwari, or sadyang hindi ko lang talaga alam, ayan, I will get back to you. Hahanapin ko kayo para sagutin yung mga tanong niyo. Kasi responsibility ko yun. And ang responsibility niyo naman is magtanong. Okay? Alright, so thank you sa pagtanong. Tara, banat pa tayo. Pag-usapan natin before sa mga overhead variances. Pag naabot na natin yung overhead variances, mag-break tayo ng 15 minutes, ha? Pero, ayan. We've just finished the materials. Actually, may tips pa tayo dito, no? Nakalimutan ko. Ayan. So, when you see direct materials, medyo tricky to compared sa iba. Bakit? Kasi you have a timing distinction. They can ask you about the price variance. Ano yung price variance natin kanina? Kailan tayo nag-record ng journal entry? At the time of purchase. Diba? So, there are two timings for recording yung price variance mo. So, you can record it at the time of purchase, and then you can record it at the time of usage. Ano yung distinction nila? So, okay, pag materials price variance, pag silent ang problem, anong tip natin? Diba? Try mo muna mag-compute ng price usage variance. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Iba kasi yung quantities kapag nag-purchase ka kaysa sa gumamit ka. Diba? Pwede naman bumili ka ng 100,000 units. Pero hindi naman lahat ng company inuubos yan. Grabe ka naman. Yung mga iba, diba, nag-budgeting tayo. Meron tayong rolling budget. Minsan, we buy extra so that we can meet an ending inventory balance for the next period rin. So, pwede naman na ginamit nilang is 80,000. Sabihin nyo rin na may tendency ako minsan na nagiging lazy yung dila ko. So, kapag hindi nyo na naintindihan, ang tunog na lang ng salita ko is sabihin nyo rin sa akin. Baka hindi na ako conscious sa tunog ng boses ko. Anyways, okay. Pwede naman na iba kasi yung timing nila. You bought 100,000, you only used 80,000. Nag-iiba, diba? Parehas pa rin naman per unit yung price variance mo. Pero yung pag-project mo ng price variance mo, nagkakaroon na ng difference between the amount that you purchased and the amount that you used. Now, okay. If the problem says price usage variance, usage, ayan, dito ka. Purchase price variance. Purchase price variance. Okay, gamitin mo lang yung quantity na diba, you use when you bought. Again, if problem is silent, it's, diba, mataas yung chances mo kung tirahin mo siya sa usage variance. If hindi siya nagpakita sa choices, sabi kasi ni sir, kung problem is silent, sa usage ako, tapos di siya nagpakita. Ibig sabihin ba erroneous yung question? Hindi naman. Check mo, baka purchase price variance naman na ang hinihingi sa'yo. Diba? Ganun lang naman siya. Ayan, yun rin yung isang terminology. If the company recognizes variances as early as possible, anong ibig sabihin na ito? Ano bang nauna? Ginagamit mo o binibili mo muna? Siyempre, binibili mo muna. So, if you record variances as early as possible, ayan, price variance naman ang tawag doon. Alright, sige. So, dito na tayo sa direct labor. Are there any questions on direct materials? Anything that you are curious about? No? It doesn't necessarily mean na hindi mo alam. Pwede rin naman na may gusto ka lang malaman. Do you have any question? So usually sa utak ko lang bibilang na ako 7 seconds. So, if lumipas 7 seconds, tumuloy na ako sa discussion ko. May mag-alala, iwan niyo lang sa chat. Tulad ng nangyari kanina, nakita ko, babalikan ko naman yung question. Okay, kung hindi ko siya mabalikan at this point in time, ayan, meron naman tayong breaks or end of the session. Okay? Alright, so ang next no, meron tayong direct materials, syempre may direct labor rin tayo. Ano ba yung analysis natin dito? It's the same thing. No? We have a total direct labor variance. Again, this is actual rate and actual quantity compared to, ano yan? Standard rate and standard quantity. Very good. Price or rate naman yan. May difference ba sa in-expect nating bayaran sa mga tao natin compared sa actual na binayad natin sa kanila? Saan nagkakaroon ng situations na ganito? Diba? Yung situations na ganito could be from a number of reasons. Pwede naman na pinag-overtime mo yung tao mo. Diba? Pag in-overtime mo yung tao, meron siyang additional na pay. Diba? May differential siya sa differential ba yung tamang term? Basta yun, diba? Mas mataas yung bayad sa overtime kaysa sa normal wages nila. Again, it could also be sa diniscuss natin kanina. We could be hiring people with more experience. Kaya iba yung rate sa expected. Tapos syempre, we're dealing with people here. Minsan, may mga tao, maganda yung gawa nila, mabilis silang gawa. Meron yung mga iba, you need to be more patient. Uh, mas mabagal sila magtrabaho. Ano yung pwede mong ipasok na analysis dito? Baka pwede tayo mag-learning curve analysis. You'll learn about that later as well. Learning curve simply means na people learn while they're on the job. So, the time it took for them to do the thing the first time, significantly nababawasan. Over and over, di ba? Na paulit-ulit nilang ginagawa yung trabaho, so nasasanay din sila. Pwedeng ganun yung magiging analysis natin kapag nakakita tayo ng efficiency variance. Diba? This also could point us towards management problem. Diba? Are we not managing our processes efficiently? Kung project-based tayo, diba? Mahina ba yung project management natin? Kaya hindi tayo efficient. Yung mga tipong ganun. And again, you could have multiple inputs. So, kung maaari sa firm, meron kang associate, meron kang senior, meron kang assistant manager, meron kang manager, and so on and so forth. Diba? Iba-iba rin naman sila ng prices and rates. And they also have different levels of expected quantity and efficiency. Diba? So, pwede rin yun. Pag meron kang multiple inputs, again, nandito ka sa mix and yield. Ano yung difference niya sa direct materials? Computation-wise, very similar. Pero, ayan, yung journal entry niya is different kasi hindi naman separate yung timing mo ng rate and ng efficiency. So, kung makikita mo, same pa rin naman eh. You debit work in process at the standard price and quantity. Pero yung salaries mo, it's paid at the actual price and quantity. Hindi mo siya masa-separate, so you have to compute for these variances separately. Saka mo siya ipapasok sa journal entry as labor rate and labor efficiency variance. Pero again, may alien ba? Hindi. Kung alam mo kung paano i-compute yung direct materials variance, ganun rin ang direct labor variance. Pero imbis na raw materials per unit, this can be direct labor hours per unit, machine hours per unit, and so on. Again, huwag kayong ma-intimidate. Diba? Para-parehas lang. Iba lang yung terminology, iba yung damit, pero the process is the same. Diba? So, pwede naman ako magbigay ng example. Like for example, we expect to pay our people, example lang ha, mamaya sabihin nyo hindi ako makatao, 20 pesos per hour. Diba? So 20 pesos per hour, tapos ang expected na matatapos nila, diba? They can finish one unit in, sabihin natin, 2 hours. So 2 hours per unit. So, paano mo siya i-compute? Again, same as direct materials. If you produce 10,000 units, ang expected mo is gagastos ka ng 20,000 hours. Diba? This leads to kano ang flexible budget for direct labor. 20,000 times 20 pesos per hour. So, meron kang 400,000 dapat na direct labor variance. Pero what if ang nangyayari talaga is nag-hire ka ng mga tao, dati etong standards mo based sa assumption na experience yung mga taong kinuha mo, pero yun pala fresh grad lahat. Okay, 10 pesos per hour, mas mura syempre kasi they don't have that experience. Pero nako, ang nangyari pala lahat sila nag-aaral pa. I mean, wala pa sa kanilang experience. So, nasasanay pa lang sila, it took them twice the time. So, ayan. Same pa rin yung analysis natin. We have 2 hours minus 4 hours. Inefficient sila per unit on 2 hours. This is unfavorable kasi inefficient nga sila. Tapos, sa rate naman, definitely, nanalo tayo. We had to pay them cheaper. So, 10 pesos minus 20 pesos, meron tayong 10 pesos na favorable. You simply have to project this. So, 10 pesos multiplied by a standard rate of 20,000 hours. Diba? This will give you how much? That is 200,000. Meron ka ng favorable rate variance. Diba? Sa efficiency variance mo, sumobra ka ng 2 hours per unit. You simply have to multiply this to yung, number of units mo. So, inefficient ka by a total of 20,000 hours. So, ang ginawa ko per unit approach, you can also tackle this by a per total approach. So, i-proporate mo na siya in total, yung total sinusubtract mo. Ako, masanay ako sa per unit. Guys, discarte nyo, ha? Meron kami mga pinaprescribe na ways para mas mapabilis para sa inyo, pero kayo pa rin ang bahala kung what makes you solve the fastest and the most accurate, ha? Huwag niyong kalimutan yan. Mamaya bilis-bilis niyo sumagot pero hindi na pala tama yung pinaglalagay. So, yun na. Kayo pa rin makakahanap na sa sarili niyo. Anyways, ang gagawin mo lang dito, 20,000 unfavorable total hours. Ayan, i-multiply mo lang sa standard rate mo. So, 20 pesos times 200,000, ayan, meron ka namang 400,000 unfavorable efficiency variance. Ganun lang siya kadali. Diba? Ayan. Total variance niya, kunin mo lang yung total actual na nagastos mo. I-compare mo sa flexible budget mo for direct labor. Now, parang at this point, if you listen well, and nakukuha mo naman yung concept, baka nabubore ka na. So, ganito lang ba na paulit-ulit? Paano ako ma-challenge sa exam? Be careful what you wish for. Pero hindi ko naman sinasabi na may mga alien na tanong. Meron rin naman kasi yung itatanong sa'yo, eto yung variance niya. Eto yung actual. Magkano yung flexible budget amount? Or magkano yung total na standard budget? Diba? Eto yung variance. Eto yung rate niya. How much yung standard hours allowed? Or how much yung total actual hours na nagastos? Baka may mga iba sa inyo na intimidate na marinig yun. Pero hindi kwan lang siya. If you know the formula, diba? Actually, pangit yung sabihin no? If you know the relationship of each component of the variances, you simply have to work back. Ano sabi ko kanina? It's just common sense, diba? And you just have to approach it logically. And, masa-save ka naman. Diba? So, dito habang nag-aaral tayo, bawal mag-memorize. Siyempre, iba-iba tayo ng utak, iba-iba tayo ng ways of learning. That's what I mean to say. Huwag yung sabihin na ako, mas mahina yung utak ko kaysa sa iba. Wag. Tanggalin niyo yung mentality na yun. You learn in different ways, in different paces. Depende pa rin sa learning style mo. Pero, as much as possible, please try to understand each component. Diba? So, yun lang naman. Tapos, kapag nandun ka na sa exam, dun mo gawin yung procedure. Pero, walang shortcut dito Kapag nag-memorize ka ng formula, nag-memorize ka ng process, mahirapan ka. No? Mas madali siya makalimutan. Kapag baliktad yung mga problem, mas mahirap siyang i-solve. So, yan. Understanding muna. Alright, so last tayo, or eto na ba yung last bago tayo umabot sa variable overhead. So, dito tayo sa multiple inputs, tapos may example tayo on how to solve. Tapos mag-break tayo, okay? So, dito muna tayo. For direct labor and direct materials, you have the possibility of multiple inputs or more than one input. So, eto na yung mga mahabang letters na nakita mo kanina. Again, it only stands for weighted average standard price of either the actual mix or the standard mix. Again, what is a mix? This is the ratio and proportion of your inputs. So, kanina may nabanggit ako. Pwedeng may associate ka, may senior ka, may assistant manager ka. Diba? Sa isang engagement, ano ba yung composition niya? Pwede naman na 50% is associates. Diba? Tapos, 30% niyan is senior associate. Tapos, 20% refers to the assistant manager. Diba? Ito percentage kong nilagay, pero usually meron in numbers yan. Diba? Kaya 4 yung kailangan kong associate for this type of project. Tapos, 2 senior or or isang senior tapos isang manager. Diba? So meron kang ratio ng inputs. May standard ka. Paano kung hindi siya nasunod? Kaya ka nagkakaroon ng mixed variance. So, bakit siya split into mix and yield? Again, nakita niyo yung illustration kanina. If meron kang total variance, you can split that into price, quantity. Quantity mo, pwede mong split into mix and yield. This also means na kapag binigyan ka ng mix variance, binigyan ka rin ng yield variance, pag pinagsama mo yun, dapat equal siya sa quantity variance mo. Diba? Just like how, pag binigyan ka ng price variance and quantity variance, kapag pinagsama mo yun, yun yung total variance mo. Okay? Ano yung split natin sa quantity? There are two factors when we have multiple inputs. It can be the mix and the yield. So take for example, ano bang itsura niya? We could have a scenario wherein, sige, pag-usapan natin ang mix natin is the ratio and proportion. Ang yield is yung mismong quantity na ginamit to achieve a certain level of units. Mag-example na agad tayo para makita natin. So we have materials, price, mix, and yield variances. So, Bonarita merger produces the popular sweet and sour face powder. It has in its budget the following standard. So, tignan nyo meron kang standard ng quantity. Dapat 1,000 ang ipapak mo. Per, Ayan, per kilo. Yeah, for 1 kilo to. So, per kilo, dapat 1,000 grams. Very intuitive naman. 1,000 grams sa 1 kilo. 1,000 grams of raw material ang ipapasok natin to achieve yung sweet and sour face powder. Para magawa natin yung sweet and sour face powder niya. Tapos, ang ratio niya is 20, 70, and 10%. 10% paminta, 70% gaw-gaw, 10% aswete. Diba? Meron ka ring standard costs per unit. When we talk about mix and yield variances, kailangan ba natin i-compare yung rates? Ang sagot hindi. Kasi breakdown to ng quantity Diba? We don't compare rates sa quantity. We always use the standard rate. Diba? We're just breaking this down further. Kasi again, dalawang standard natin. We have the quantity standard and the mix standard. So how do we analyze this? Yung weighted average standard price at actual mix, what does that mean? So you have the actual quantity at actual mix. Ito yun. Diba? Pero ano dapat yung standard quantity mo sana? If you made 190 kilos, ilang grams dapat ang binuhos mo? 1,000 grams times 190 kilos, you have 190,000 grams. Okay? So 190,000 grams. Ano to? Ito yung flexible budget mo sana. I mean, mas common siya as yung standard allowed mo. Diba? Tapos, anong gagawin mo dito? Diba? Ba't ako nagsulat ng F? Anong gagawin mo dyan sa 190,000 na yan? Yan dapat yung quantity na pinasok mo. Dito pa lang makikita mo na may difference ka na sa actual na pinasok mo. 200,000 ang pinasok mo. So, meron kang difference sa quantity component, tapos sa ratio, meron ba? Pwede mo namang isa-isahin yan Divide mo yung 45 by 200,000. So, 45 divided by 200, ang ratio ng paminta is 22.5%. May difference na rin sa ratios. Pero hindi mo sila pwedeng ipagsama-sama. Diba? You can solve for the quantity variance, pero the question you're trying to solve with mix and yield is, first, sa mix, tama ba yung ratio and proportion ng inputs ko? Am I saving more by using this ratio? Diba? Tapos, pagdating naman sa yield, diba? Am I making enough based sa inputs ko? Diba? Yung outputs ko ba, comparable siya sa inputs na pinapasok ko. Kaya nga yield na tawag. Diba? Those are the questions that we're trying to answer. Kaya hinihiwalay natin yung analysis ng ratio, hinihiwalay natin yung analysis ng quantity. So, eto ha. Sir, ang hirap naman yan. Bakit sinasabi nyo? Hindi, madali lang siya. Eto lang siya. You have yung actual quantity, i-restate mo lang to para sa standard quantity mo. So again, actual mix, hanapin mo, i-restate mo siya sa standard quantity. Anong sinusolve natin? Yun na yung nakikita mo kanina na ayan mo spam. Diba? Ganun lang siya. So, I want you to look at this. Ang quantity variance mo, if you break it down, kasi ang tinitignan lang natin, diba? Ang formula lang natin kanina, actual quantity minus standard quantity. Siyempre, multiplied by standard rate. But if you have multiple inputs, your actual quantity is actually composed of an actual mix and an actual quantity. Diba? So, actual mix times actual quantity compared to standard mix times standard quantity. Diba? Pag ito ang kino-compare mo, yan yung total na quantity variance. Kapag ang kino-compare mo naman, now we want to break this down. Gusto mo i-compare yung mix, ang gawin mo lang, sorry nag-EQ ako dalawa. Dapat AM yan. So actual mix times actual quantity. If you want to compare mix, tanggalin mo yung quantity aspect. Pero saan tayo magbe-base? Sa actual quantity? Hindi. Diba? Gusto natin i-base sa standard quantity. So yung standard quantity mo at actual mix compared sa standard mix mo sa standard quantity. Or basically, kung i-isolate mo siya, you can compute yung mix mo as ayan, actual mix minus standard mix times standard quantity. Pero may hirap siyang ganyan, no? Kasi percentages ang pinag-uusapan natin. But I just hope you see the relationship. Diba? Tapos ang yield mo naman, anong kino-compare mo? This is actual quantity minus standard quantity. Saan? Again, standard mix. Gets? Yun lang ginagawa natin. So, ano ang standard quantity at actual mix natin? So, pwede mong gawin is kunin mo yung ratio and proportion. Diba? So, ang gagawin ko dito, I don't know kung anong model ng calculator niya. Or if you want to solve this fast, what you could do is, yung 200,000, ilagay mo dito sa memory class mo. Diba? Parang gagawin mo na lang, 45,000 divided by memory recall, makuha mo agad yung ratio and proportion. I-multiply mo ng 190. Rest mo equals. Masastore yan sa grand total mo. So, after that, gawin mo na 125 divided by memory recall times 190 equals. Ano yun sa grand total mo? Basta, wag kang magpindot ng equals more than you have to. Okay? Tapos, lastly, 30,000 divided by memory recall times 190. Ayan. Ay, sorry may nakalimutan na ako kaya 190 pa rin yung lalabas na sagot. Diba? Ang nakalimutan ko, i-multiply mo siya by standard unit cost. So, ako rin kaya na-break. Anyway, last example natin to before we have that break, okay? So, eto siya. 45,000 divided by 200,000 times 190 times 3. Ayan. So, pwede mong equals yan. Nakita mo yung process? Yung ratio and proportion, kinukuha mo by dividing yung actual mix by the actual quantity. I-multiply mo siya by the standard quantity para makuha mo yung proportion sana niya for the standard quantity. And then i-multiply mo by the standard cost niya. Not the actual price, ha? Standard unit cost. Okay? So, Diba? Baka isipin mo kasi, sir, sobrang hirap naman yan. Hindi, diba? You have to master your calculator. So, for me, this is my way. 200,000, memory recall ko yan, diba? So, 45 divided by memory recall times 190 times 3 equals. So, same process, 125 divided by memory recall times 190 times 4 equals. Tapos, again, 30,000 divided by 200,000 times 190, ayan, times 5 equals. Pag kinuha ko yung grand total ko, ayan, what should I be getting? Dapat, ang cost ng materials ko at this stage is around, tama ba, 785,000. So, kung hindi ito yung nakuha nyo, no, sabihin nyo lang, baka ako naman yung mali. So, again, that is 45. This is actual mix, ha? Divided by 200,000 times 190. Ang paminta na ginamit niya dapat at actual at standard quantity is 42,750 kung ginagamit mo yung actual mix. I-multiply mo yun by 3. Ayan. Dapat ang makuha nyo is 128,250 ang cost ng paminta at the standard quantity using the actual mix. Nakahabol ba lahat? Sige, you do that dun sa gawgaw, gawin mo sa aswete, diba? 125 divided by 200,000 will give you 62.5%. Tapos, i-multiply mo yun by 190. Dapat ang nagamit niya is 118,750 na gawgaw. Tapos, times 4. Memory plus mo na rin yan. Diba? Ganun lang. 30,000 divided by 200,000 times 190 multiplied by 5. Ayan. So, ang nakukuha ko pala dito, this is 745,750. If iba tayo na nakukuha, again, sabihin nyo, democratic naman tayo dito. Education should be democratic, sabihin nyo lang, baka may hindi ako nakikita. Don't worry. No. Paano naman kung standard mix ang pinapag-usapan natin? So, eto, what if yung standard mix, parang, sige, okay. Standard mix naman, eto, 190, sure na yan. Diba, 190 times 20%, yun yung paminta mo, yun yung gawgaw mo, yan yung atswete mo. Diba? So, 190 times 20%, this will give you 38 times 3. Diba? Ang gawgaw mo, 190,000 times 70%, this will give you 133. Memory plus mo na rin yan. Times 4 pa pala. Huwag niyong kakalimutan. Ang kulit na utak ko ngayon. Sige. So, 190 times 20% times 3, memory plus. 190 times 70 times 4, memory plus. Tapos, 190 times 10 times 5, memory plus niyo. Diba? Ano yung standard dapat na nakukuha natin? Flexible budget, dapat meron tayo 741,100. Kaya ako nalilito. I'm very sorry na. Again, diba? Kaya wag kayong mahiya mag-point out kasi tao rin ako. Diba? Ang instructors natin, minsan naliligaw yung utak nila at naligaw rin ang utak ko. We want to compare yung mix at actual quantity. Diba? Very sorry, I didn't catch that immediately. Sige, let's set it right again. So, anong gagawin mo dito? Yung 200,000, i-restate mo as if naka-actual mix ka. Okay? So, anong mangyayari dito? This is the standard price for your actual at standard mix. So, anong makukuha mo dito? You need this to complete the mix variance, okay? 200,000 times 20% times 3. 200,000 times 70% times 4. And then 200,000 times 10% times 5. Diba? You should get 780,000. Ayun. That is if yung actual mo sana quantity is at a standard mix. Gets? Tapos, kapag yung yung standard quantity mo naman at standard mix, eto na yung nakuha mo. Gets ba? Pero ang kino-compare natin sa mix, diba? Kailangan mo makuha yung actual quantity at actual mix. So, 45,000 times 3, 125,000 times 4, tapos meron kang 30,000 times 5. Ano makuha mo dito? You get, eto na, actual quantity at actual mix, 785. You had actual quantity. Kinumpare mo yung actual mix sa standard mix. Anong makukuha mo? This is your mix variance. This is 5,000. Diba? 5,000. Paano mo i-analyze to? Pwedeng actual minus budget, yung tinuro natin kanina. If you want to analyze this logically, if you use the standard mix, ang ginastos mo lang sana ay 780, kahit na 200,000 ang ginamit mo, grams. Pero dahil pinilit mo yung mix mo, diba? Nag-actual mix ka, sumobra ka ng 5,000. So this is unfavorable. Gets? That's our mix variance. So, ano tong nakuha natin na 741? We have actual quantity at standard mix. I-compare natin siya sa standard quantity at standard mix. Gets ba? So, kung i-compare mo tong 780,000 sa 741,000, ano makuha mo dito? You will get a materials yield variance. Kasi yung mix, walang nagbago eh. Tinitignan mo na lang yung differences between quantities para ma-achieve sana yung 190 kilos ng powder. Diba? Nag-guess nyo ba? Meron kang variance na 39,000. 39,000, what does this mean? Sumobra ka kasi ng ginamit. Diba? Yung actual quantity mo far exceeded yung standard quantity mo. By how many? Diba? 780 minus 741. Or kung units to, diba? Dapat 190 lang ginamit mo. Gumamit ka 200,000. Ang effect nun, monetarily, is 39,000. Sumobra ka, diba? Unfavorable. So, yun ang mix and yield variance natin. Ano mangyari pag pinagsama mo to? You will get unfavorable 44,000. This is the quantity variance. Okay? How do you compute that? Kunin mo lang yung weighted average or yung sum ng individual na differences. Diba? That's something that you could do. Or, nandun naman na tayo eh. I-compare mo yung actual quantity at actual mix sa standard quantity at standard mix. Etong 785 na nakuha natin. I-less mo yung 741. You will still get 44,000 unfavorable. Okay? Alright. Sige. So, do you have any questions so far? Masyado bang magulo yung explanation ko? Is there something that you want me to revisit? Sorry, nag-brain fart ako. Hopefully, naka-recover ako and hindi kayo nawala during the discussion. If nawala kayo, sabihin nyo lang. Ang responsibility kong ayusin yun. Any questions? Is everything clear? Bago tayo mag-break? Alright, sige. Mukhang wala naman. Let's take a short 15-minute break. So, dito sa Pilipinas, di ko kasi alam kung ano oras sa Saudi, no? 8:41. I'll come back mga 8:55, 8:56. Kayo na lang mag-measure ng oras niya. Alright? If you have any questions, iwan nyo lang sa chat. Sasagutan natin together kapag bumalik ako. Okay? So, ayan. Get some rest. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Okay? Alright.